Jessica Harper always thought she knew her husband. 15 years of marriage seemed more than enough time to understand every expression, every silence, every shift in his mood. She could tell when he was stressed about work by the way his jaw tensed during dinner. She knew he was proud of their children by the small smile that appeared when Noah brought home a good report card, or when Sophie scored a goal at soccer practice. She knew his favorite coffee order, the way he liked his shirts folded, and that he always fell asleep on his right side facing away from her. But somewhere in the last few months, David had become a stranger sleeping in her bed. It started subtly, the way most endings do. Small things, Jessica told herself, not to overthink. In January of 2024, David joined a new gym closer to downtown Austin. Even though they had a perfectly good setup in their garage, he said he wanted access to better equipment, more variety in his workouts. Jessica, who had been married to a personal trainer for over a decade, understood the importance of fitness in his life and didn't question it. Then came the new clothes. Designer athletic wear that cost 3 times what he usually spent. Cologne she didn't recognize, sharper and more expensive than the familiar scent she'd bought him for Christmas. He started waking up at 5:30 in the morning instead of 6:30, leaving the house before she and the kids were even awake. When she asked about it, he said he wanted to beat the morning rush at the gym, get his workout done before his first client at 9. February brought more distance. David stopped reaching for her hand during their evening walks around the neighborhood, a ritual they'd maintained for years. He claimed his wrist hurt from overtraining. When she suggested he see a doctor, he brushed it off, saying it would heal on its own. The walks themselves became less frequent, then stopped altogether. He was too tired, he said. Training clients all day was exhausting. By March, Jessica's stomach had developed a permanent knot of unease that she couldn't quite name. It wasn't any single thing David did or didn't do. It was the accumulation of small absences, tiny withdrawals, that added up to something she couldn't ignore anymore. He stopped asking about her day. When she told him about the challenging project at work, about the new software implementation she was leading that had the entire operations team stressed, he nodded absently while scrolling through his phone. The man who once listened to every detail of her professional victories and frustrations now seemed to barely register her voice. Their intimacy had evaporated like morning dew under harsh sunlight. It had been 7 weeks since they'd made love. 7 weeks of Jessica initiating only to be met with excuses. He was tired. His back hurt. He had an early morning. Each rejection felt like a small death, but she told herself it was normal. They'd been together for 15 years. Passion ebbed and flowed in long marriages. This was just a low point. It would pass. But deep in her gut, in that ancient place where women's intuition lives and breathes, Jessica knew something was wrong. April arrived with its Texas heat and blooming wild flowers, and with it came the moment that changed everything. It was a Wednesday night, April 10th, and Jessica was loading the dishwasher after dinner while David sat in the living room watching a basketball game. She'd made his favorite meal, grilled chicken with roasted vegetables, hoping the gesture might spark some warmth between them. He'd eaten in silence, eyes on his phone more than his plate, and retreated to the couch immediately after. Jessica's hands stilled in the soapy water as she watched him through the kitchen doorway. He was smiling at his phone screen, a soft expression she hadn't seen directed at her in months. His thumbs moved rapidly, typing something, and then he actually laughed, a quiet chuckle that made her chest tighten painfully. When was the last time she'd made him laugh like that? She dried her hands and walked into the living room, trying to keep her voice casual. "What's so funny?" David's head snapped up, and for just a second, maybe half a second, Jessica saw something flash across his face. Guilt? Fear? But it disappeared so quickly, she almost convinced herself she'd imagined it. "Just a meme from the gym group chat," he said, locking his phone and setting it face down on the couch cushion beside him. "You know how the guys are?" Jessica nodded, forcing a smile, but her heart was pounding. In 15 years of marriage, David had never been secretive about his phone. It usually sat on the kitchen counter, unlocked, available. She'd never felt the need to look through it because there'd never been a reason not to trust him. But now, watching him place it face down, watching the careful way he composed his expression, she felt that knot in her stomach twist tighter. That night, she lay awake long after David fell asleep. The bedroom was dark except for the faint glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. David slept on his side of the bed, his back to her as always, but the space between them felt like an ocean. Jessica stared at the ceiling and catalogued every strange moment of the past few months, every excuse, every absence, every time he'd chosen his phone over her. She thought about the perfume she'd smelled on his jacket 2 weeks ago. Not her perfume, something floral and sweet. When she'd mentioned it casually, asking if maybe a client had hugged him after a particularly good training session, he'd said he didn't smell anything. Maybe it was from someone at the gym. He'd shrugged. People were always friendly. She thought about the weekend in March when he'd said he had to work. On a Saturday? He never worked Saturdays. That was family time, sacred time. But he'd said a wealthy client was only available that day and was willing to pay double. Jessica had spent that Saturday taking Noah to his baseball game and Sophie to her friend's birthday party, feeling oddly incomplete, like she was playing the role of both parents poorly instead of one parent well. She thought about the credit card statement she'd glanced at last week. There was a charge from a restaurant in downtown Austin, an expensive steakhouse she'd never been to. $168 on a Tuesday afternoon. When she'd asked David about it, he'd said it was a business lunch with a potential investor for the gym. She'd accepted the explanation because, why wouldn't she? David had never given her a reason not to trust him. But now, lying in the darkness, Jessica let herself think the thought she'd been pushing away for weeks. What if he's having an affair? The thought sent ice through her veins. No, David wouldn't. They had 2 children. They had a life. They'd been each other's person since she was 24 years old, and he was 26. They'd built everything together. The house they lived in, the family they'd created, the 15 years of shared history that couldn't just be erased by what? By some woman at the gym? By a midlife crisis? By whatever this was? Jessica rolled onto her side, facing away from David now, mirroring his position. Tears leaked silently from the corners of her eyes onto her pillow. She felt foolish for crying. She had no proof, just instinct, just that terrible knowing that lived in her bones. She promised herself she would watch more carefully, pay attention. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe David was just stressed about work. Maybe the gym wasn't doing as well financially as he'd hoped. Maybe he was worried about money and didn't want to burden her. There could be 1,000 explanations that had nothing to do with betrayal, but in the deepest part of her heart, Jessica knew she was lying to herself. The next morning, Thursday, April 11th, Jessica woke to an empty bed. David's side was already cold. The clock on her nightstand read 6:15. She dragged herself up, exhaustion weighing down her limbs from hours of restless half-sleep, and went through the motions of her morning routine. Shower, dress, wake the kids, make breakfast, pack lunches, check homework folders. Noah appeared in the kitchen first, hair sticking up in every direction, still in his pajamas. At 12 years old, he was caught in that awkward space between boy and teenager, his voice cracking unpredictably, and his feet suddenly too big for his body. "Where's Dad?" he asked, pouring himself a bowl of cereal. "He left early for the gym," Jessica said, flipping pancakes on the griddle even though her stomach churned too much to eat. "You know how he is in the mornings." Noah grunted, already absorbed in his phone. Jessica wanted to tell him to put it away during breakfast, but she didn't have the energy for the argument. "Pick your battles," she reminded herself. Sophie bounded in moments later, all 8-year-old energy and sunshine. Her blonde hair, so much like David's, was tangled from sleep, and she wore mismatched pajamas that she'd insisted on picking out herself the night before. "Pancakes!" Sophie squealed, climbing onto a kitchen stool. "Can I have chocolate chips in mine?" "Already added," Jessica said, sliding a plate in front of her daughter. Sophie's joy was uncomplicated and pure, and for a moment, Jessica felt some of the tightness in her chest ease. This was real. Her children were real. Whatever was happening with David, she had to protect this. The day passed in a blur of meetings and emails, and the constant low-level stress that came with managing operations for a tech company going through rapid growth. Jessica had worked at Apex Solutions for 8 years, climbing from a junior operations coordinator to senior manager. She was good at her job, excellent even, which is why they'd trusted her with the new software implementation that would streamline half their processes, but was causing constant headaches as they worked through the bugs. She sat through a 2-hour meeting with the development team, nodding at the right times, asking relevant questions, but part of her brain was elsewhere. On her phone, which sat face up on the conference table. On David, who hadn't texted her once all day. That wasn't unusual recently, but today it felt pointed, deliberate. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Jessica was back at her desk, reviewing a report that should have taken 20 minutes but had already taken 40 because she couldn't focus. Her office phone rang, and she answered automatically. "Jessica Harper. Hey, it's Rachel. You busy?" Jessica felt relief flood through her at the sound of her best friend's voice. Rachel Chen had been her closest friend for 10 years, ever since they'd met at a hospital fundraiser where Jessica had been volunteering and Rachel had been working a shift as an ER nurse. They'd bonded over lukewarm coffee in the cafeteria and had been inseparable ever since. "Never too busy for you," Jessica said, and meant it. "What's up?" "That's my line. You've been weird lately. Quiet. I tried calling you twice last week and you didn't call back." Jessica winced. She had been avoiding Rachel, mostly because she knew her friend would see right through any lie she tried to tell. Rachel had a built-in bullshit detector that made her excellent at her job and impossible to deceive. "I'm sorry. Work has been crazy with this new software thing, and the kids have had so much going on, and David?" Rachel interrupted gently. "How's David?" Jessica's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to say, "Fine, everything's fine," but what came out instead was, "I think something's wrong." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Rachel said, voice low and serious, "Wrong how?" "I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'm being paranoid." Jessica's voice cracked despite her best efforts to keep it steady. "He's just been so distant lately. Different. And I found a charge on the credit card from this expensive restaurant, and he said it was a business lunch. But what if—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Saying it out loud would make it real. "What if it wasn't?" Rachel finished for her. "Jess, have you talked to him? Actually sat down and asked him what's going on?" "I've tried. Every time I bring up us, or our relationship, or suggest maybe we should do something together, just the two of us, he shuts down, says he's tired or stressed about money, or just doesn't have the bandwidth right now." Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you want to know the truth? Or do you want to keep telling yourself it's nothing?" The question hit Jessica like a physical blow. Because that was it, wasn't it? She'd been choosing willful ignorance, because knowing the truth was terrifying. But living in this limbo of suspicion and anxiety was slowly killing her. "I want to know," Jessica whispered. "Then find out," Rachel said simply. "However you need to, because you can't live like this, Jess. It's eating you alive." They talked for a few more minutes, Rachel promising to come over that weekend with wine and support. When Jessica hung up, she felt both better and worse. Better because she'd finally said the fear out loud to someone who wouldn't judge her. Worse because now she had to actually do something about it. At 5:45, Jessica packed up her laptop and headed home. The drive through Austin traffic gave her too much time to think, too much time to imagine scenarios. David with another woman, David kissing someone else, David building a secret life while she made his favorite dinners and folded his laundry and raised his children. By the time she pulled into their driveway, Jessica's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. David's truck was already there, which was unusual. He typically didn't get home until 7 or later. Jessica sat in her car for a long moment, staring at their house. It was a nice house, nothing extravagant, but comfortable. 4 bedrooms, a big backyard where Sophie practiced her soccer skills, and Noah shot baskets. They'd bought it 6 years ago, right after Jessica's promotion had given them enough for a down payment. She remembered how excited they'd been, planning which rooms would be whose, imagining their future in these walls. Had David been imagining that same future, or had he already been planning his exit? Jessica forced herself out of the car and into the house. David was in the kitchen, surprisingly, starting dinner. He looked up when she walked in, and for just a second, she saw the man she'd fallen in love with, the smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, the easy confidence that had first attracted her. "Hey," he said, "I got home early. Thought I'd cook tonight. Give you a break." Jessica set her purse on the counter, suspicion immediately flaring. David never cooked on weekdays. Never. "That's sweet. Thank you." She watched him move around their kitchen, pulling out ingredients for pasta, and tried to see what was different. He looked the same. Same sandy blonde hair, same broad shoulders from years of weight training, same hands that used to touch her with reverence. But there was something in his energy, something lighter, like he was carrying a secret that made him happy. The thought made her nauseous. "How was your day?" Jessica asked, leaning against the counter. "Fine. Busy. Had back-to-back clients all afternoon." David didn't look at her as he spoke, focused on chopping vegetables. "How about you?" "Same. The software implementation is still a nightmare, but we're making progress." "That's good." The conversation died there, suffocated by the weight of everything they weren't saying. Jessica excused herself to change clothes and check on the kids. Noah was in his room doing homework, and Sophie was in the playroom, creating an elaborate scenario with her dolls. Everything looked normal. Everything felt wrong. Dinner was quiet. David asked the kids about their day, listened to Sophie's animated story about recess, helped Noah with a math problem. He was a good father. He'd always been a good father. That was what made this so impossible to reconcile. How could someone who loved his children so much do something that would destroy their family? After dinner, after the dishes were done, and the kids were in bed, Jessica found David in their bedroom. He was already under the covers, reading something on his phone. That phone. Always that phone. "David," Jessica said, sitting on her side of the bed. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Can we talk?" He looked up, and she saw wariness flash across his face. "About what?" "About us. About how we've been lately. I feel like you're pulling away from me, and I don't understand why." David sighed, a long, exhausted sound that made Jessica feel like she was being burdensome just by existing. "Jess, I'm just tired. Work is stressful. The gym needs some equipment upgrades we can't really afford right now. I've got a lot on my mind." "Then talk to me about it. We're supposed to be partners. We're supposed to face things together." "I know," but he didn't elaborate. He just turned back to his phone. Jessica felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Do you still love me?" The question hung in the air between them. For 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10. Each second of silence was an answer in itself. Finally, David said, "Of course I do. You're the mother of my children. Not, I love you. Not, you're my person. Or, you're my everything, like he used to say. Just, the mother of my children, like she was a role he appreciated rather than a person he cherished." Jessica turned off her bedside lamp without saying anything else. She lay in the darkness, listening to David's breathing, even out as he fell asleep. and felt more alone than she ever had in her entire life. Something was broken between them. Whether it could be fixed, or whether it was already too late, she didn't know. But lying there in the dark, feeling the distance between her body and her husband's like a physical chasm, Jessica made herself a promise. She would find out the truth, whatever it was, whatever it cost her. She deserved to know what was happening to her marriage, to her life, to the future she'd thought she was building. And if David was betraying her, if he was choosing someone else over the 15 years they'd built together, then she would face that truth with her eyes open and her spine straight. Because Jessica Harper was a lot of things, but she was not a woman who lived in denial. Not anymore. The next morning, Friday, April 12th, Jessica woke with a sense of purpose that felt almost foreign after weeks of floating through her days in an anxious fog. David was already gone, his side of the bed cold and empty as usual. She checked her phone. 5:43 in the morning. He'd left even earlier than normal. She got the kids ready for school on autopilot, her mind already racing through possibilities. What was she looking for, exactly? Proof? Evidence? Or was she hoping to find nothing so she could convince herself she'd been wrong all along? After dropping Noah and Sophie at school, Jessica sat in her car in the parking lot and opened the family tracking app on her phone. They'd installed it 3 years ago when Noah had started middle school and wanted more independence. It was supposed to be for safety, for knowing where the kids were. But both she and David were on it too, a mutual agreement that had never seemed invasive until now. Her finger hovered over David's name. Was this wrong? Was checking her husband's location a violation of trust? But how could she violate trust that might already be broken? She tapped his name. The map loaded, showing a blue dot at the gym where David co-owned his personal training business. Downtown Austin, about 20 minutes from their house. Nothing suspicious. He was exactly where he said he'd be. Jessica felt foolish. See? She was being paranoid, creating problems that didn't exist because she was stressed about work and projecting it onto her marriage. She drove to her own office, determined to focus on work, to be productive, to stop inventing catastrophes. For 3 hours, she managed it. She reviewed reports, responded to urgent emails, had a productive video call with the software development team about bug fixes. She was in the middle of updating a project timeline when her phone buzzed with a text. David, going to be late tonight. Client wants evening session. Don't wait up. Jessica stared at the message. Evening sessions weren't unusual for David. Many of his clients had demanding day jobs and could only work out after hours. But something about the terseness of the text, the lack of any warmth or apology for missing dinner again, made that familiar knot tighten in her stomach. She typed back, "Okay. What time do you think you'll be home?" The 3 dots appeared, showing he was typing. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, "Not sure. Late. I'll grab something to eat after." Jessica set her phone down and took a slow breath. "It's fine," she told herself. "He's working. That's all. He's working." But her hands reached for her phone again, opening the tracking app before she could talk herself out of it. David's blue dot was still at the gym. She watched it for a moment, feeling ridiculous, and was about to close the app when the dot moved. She watched, transfixed, as the blue dot traveled through downtown Austin. It was heading west, away from their neighborhood, away from the areas where most of his clients lived. The dot stopped at what appeared to be a residential area in Westlake Hills, one of the more expensive parts of Austin. Jessica zoomed in on the map. The location showed a luxury apartment complex called Meridian Heights. Her heart started pounding. Why would David be at an apartment complex in the middle of a workday? Maybe a client lived there. That made sense. Wealthy clients who could afford personal training often lived in nice areas. Jessica tried to return to work, but her eyes kept drifting to her phone. 20 minutes passed. The blue dot didn't move. 40 minutes. Still there. An hour. At 2:15 in the afternoon, Jessica grabbed her purse and left the office, telling her assistant she had a personal appointment. She drove toward Westlake Hills with her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She told herself she was just going to drive by. Just look. Just see. It took 25 minutes to reach Meridian Heights. The complex was beautiful. All modern glass and steel with perfectly manicured landscaping. The kind of place that probably cost $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. Jessica parked across the street, partially hidden by a line of oak trees, and checked the tracking app again. David was still there, still inside. She waited, her entire body tense with adrenaline and dread. Cars came and went. A woman in designer athletic wear walked a small white dog. A delivery driver dropped off packages in the lobby. Normal life happening all around her, while Jessica's world tilted on its axis. At 2:55, the main doors opened. David walked out, but he wasn't alone. Next to him was a woman. Tall, blonde, probably in her early 30s. She wore expensive workout clothes that showed off a toned, athletic body. The kind of body that came from hours at the gym, from dedicated training. The kind of body David would appreciate professionally, or personally. Jessica's breath caught in her throat as she watched them walk toward the parking lot. They were talking, standing close. Too close. The woman laughed at something David said, throwing her head back, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. It was a casual gesture, friendly even, the kind of touch that could mean nothing. Except David's hand went to the small of her back as they walked, possessive, intimate, the kind of touch that meant everything. They stopped between two cars, a black Tesla and David's truck. Jessica fumbled for her phone, opening the camera with shaking hands. She had to document this, had to have proof, had to make sure she wasn't imagining things because her mind was playing tricks on her. Through her phone screen, she watched David lean down. The woman tilted her face up, and they kissed. Not a friendly peck, not a quick goodbye, a real kiss. Long and deep and familiar. The kind of kiss between two people who had done this many times before. His hand cupped her face, her arms wrapped around his waist. They stood there in the parking lot of this expensive apartment complex, kissing like they had every right to. Like they weren't destroying a 15-year marriage with every second their lips touched. Jessica's hands shook so violently she almost dropped her phone, but she managed to take 3 photos. Click, click, click. Evidence. Proof. Reality captured in pixels. The woman pulled away first, smiling up at David with an expression Jessica recognized because she'd worn it herself once. Adoration, happiness, love. David said something that made her laugh again, then kissed her forehead. The gesture was so tender it felt like a knife twisting in Jessica's chest. He used to kiss her forehead like that, back when she was the one who made him smile that way. The woman got into the Tesla. David stood there watching her drive away, a small smile on his face that Jessica could see even from across the street. Only after the Tesla disappeared did he get into his truck and drive off in the opposite direction. Jessica sat frozen in her car. Her entire body felt numb, like her nervous system had short-circuited from overload. Her brain kept trying to make sense of what she'd just seen, trying to find some innocent explanation, but there wasn't one. There was no way to explain away that kiss, that intimacy, the way David had touched that woman like she belonged to him. How long? That was the first coherent thought Jessica could form. How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? Had it started in January when he joined the new gym? Or had it been going on longer? And Jessica had just been too trusting, too naive, too busy with work and kids to notice. She looked down at her phone, at the photos she'd taken. In the first one, they were just standing close. In the second, they were kissing. In the third, captured in that perfect, terrible moment, you could see David's hand on the woman's face, could see the way they looked at each other. Jessica's vision blurred with tears. She pressed her palm against her mouth to muffle the sob that wanted to escape. Not here. Not now. She couldn't fall apart in a parking lot across from her husband's mistress's apartment building. She needed to think. She needed to plan. Because confronting David right now, in this emotional state, wouldn't accomplish anything. He'd deny it, or minimize it, or somehow make her feel like she was overreacting. She needed more than 3 photos taken from across the street. She needed irrefutable proof. Jessica wiped her eyes and forced herself to breathe. In through her nose, out through her mouth. Again, again, until her hands stopped shaking enough to start the car. She drove to a coffee shop on the other side of town, far from her office, far from her house, somewhere no one would know her. She ordered tea she didn't drink and sat in a corner booth, staring at her phone. The tracking app showed David heading back downtown, probably to the gym to maintain his alibi. Jessica pulled up their cell phone account online. They were on a family plan, everything linked. She navigated to David's phone usage. What she found made her stomach drop. Hundreds of text messages to a number she didn't recognize, starting back in early January. In the beginning, just a few a day, but by February, dozens. By March, over 100 messages some days. Long phone calls late at night. Calls that happened when Jessica thought David was asleep next to her, when he must have been in another room, talking to this woman while his wife and children slept upstairs. Jessica took screenshots of everything. Call logs, text message timestamps. She created a folder in her email and sent everything to herself, then deleted the sent messages from her phone's email app. She was thinking like a prosecutor now, building a case, because some part of her knew this wouldn't end in reconciliation and therapy. This would end in lawyers and custody agreements and dividing up 15 years of shared life. By the time she left the coffee shop, it was 4:30. She'd been sitting there for over an hour and a half, her tea cold and untouched. She needed to pick up the kids from after-school care by 5:30, needed to go home and make dinner and help with homework and be a mother, even though her entire world was crumbling. Jessica picked up Noah and Sophie, listening to them chatter about their days. Sophie had scored 2 goals at recess soccer. Noah had gotten an A on his science quiz. Normal, beautiful childhood moments that Jessica tried to focus on because they were real and good and untouched by the ugliness she'd discovered. At home, she made spaghetti with marinara sauce, Sophie's favorite. She helped Noah with his math homework while the pasta boiled. She laughed at Sophie's joke about her teacher's funny sneeze. She played the role of a functional adult, of a present mother, while inside, she felt like she was bleeding out. David came home at 9:43, almost 10 o'clock, just like he'd said, late. "Hey," he said, dropping his gym bag by the door. "Sorry, that session ran long." Jessica looked up from where she sat on the couch, pretending to read a book she hadn't processed a single word of. "It's fine. There's leftover spaghetti in the fridge if you're hungry. I grabbed a burger on the way home." David headed toward the stairs. "I'm gonna shower and crash. I'm exhausted." "David," Jessica said, and he paused with one foot on the bottom step. "Where were you today? Around 2:30? She watched his face carefully, saw the micro-expression of panic before he controlled it. "At the gym. Why?" "Just wondered. You seem to be gone from there for a while according to your calendar." It was a test, and he failed it immediately. "Oh, right. I had to meet a potential client at his place to see his home gym setup. Guy wants in-home training." Lie. The word hung between them, even though Jessica didn't say it out loud. He'd lied so easily, so smoothly, like he'd had the excuse prepared. "In Westlake Hills?" Jessica asked, her voice carefully neutral. David's eyes widened fractionally. "How did you—" He caught himself. "Yeah, big house out there. Why all the questions?" "No reason. Just making conversation." The air between them felt charged with all the words they weren't saying. David stared at her for a long moment, like he was trying to figure out how much she knew, how much danger he was in. Then he said, "I'm gonna shower," and disappeared upstairs. Jessica sat very still, listening to the water run in the bathroom above her. She'd given him a chance, a tiny opening to tell the truth, to say he'd been at that apartment complex, that he'd met someone, that he'd made a mistake. Instead, he'd chosen to lie, to look her in the face and construct a story that painted him as faithful. That's when Jessica knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a midlife crisis that could be worked through. This was calculated. This was a man who had built a second life and was actively lying to protect it. She pulled out her phone and searched for divorce attorneys in Austin. She needed someone good, someone who specialized in infidelity cases, someone who could help her protect her children and her assets, because if David could lie this easily about where he'd been, he could lie about anything. Bank accounts, property, whatever he'd been spending on his girlfriend. Jessica found a firm with excellent reviews and sent an inquiry through their website. She'd call on Monday to schedule a consultation. But first, she needed more evidence. The photos were good, but if David was bringing this woman into their lives, into proximity with their children, she needed documentation of that too. An idea formed in her mind. Dangerous, but necessary. Jessica went upstairs quietly. David was still in the shower. She could hear him singing, actually singing, which he never did anymore. Happy, relaxed, freshly showered after kissing another woman. His phone sat on the dresser, charging. Jessica's heart hammered as she picked it up. It was locked with facial recognition. Of course it was. But 3 years ago, when he'd set up that security, she'd been part of the setup process. Her face had been added as an authorized user because they'd shared everything back then. Trusted everything. Had he removed her access? There was only one way to find out. She held the phone up to her face. It unlocked. Jessica nearly gasped out loud. He hadn't removed her. In all these months of sneaking around, of building his affair, he'd never thought to take her facial recognition off his phone. Arrogant, careless, or maybe so deep in his delusion that he didn't think he'd ever get caught. The shower was still running. She had maybe 2 minutes. Jessica opened his messages. The most recent conversation was pinned at the top. Vanessa Cole. The name attached to hundreds of texts. The name attached to David's betrayal. Jessica scrolled through the messages, her stomach churning with every swipe. They went back to January 4th, 8 months. This had been going on for 8 months. The early messages were flirtatious, but careful. David complimenting her form during training sessions. Vanessa saying he was the best trainer she'd ever had. Slowly escalating to personal comments. To meeting for coffee after her training session. To the first time they'd kissed, which according to their messages, happened on January 29th in his truck after he'd driven her home from the gym. By February, they were saying they loved each other. By March, they were planning a future together. Jessica's hands shook as she read David's words to this woman. Words he used to say to her. You make me feel alive again. I can't stop thinking about you. Being with you is the only time I feel like myself. And Vanessa's responses. I've never felt this way about anyone. You're everything I've been looking for. I know it's complicated with your family, but we'll figure it out. Complicated with your family. Like Jessica and Noah and Sophie were obstacles to be worked around, rather than human beings who would be destroyed by this. There were photos, intimate photos, that made Jessica want to throw the phone across the room. Pictures of them together at restaurants Jessica had never been to. At a weekend resort in the hill country that David had supposedly spent at a training conference. Selfies in bed, David's arm around Vanessa, both of them smiling like people in love. The most recent messages were from today, from this afternoon, after Jessica had seen them together. Vanessa, I miss you already. Can't wait for tonight. David, me too, baby. I told her I'd be late. We have time. Jessica felt bile rise in her throat. Tonight. He'd told Jessica he had a late client so he could be with Vanessa tonight. Maybe he was planning to go back to that apartment. Maybe they had a regular schedule. Maybe this was happening multiple times a week, while Jessica sat at home with their children, completely oblivious. She took screenshots of everything, every message, every photo, every incriminating piece of evidence. She emailed them to herself in batches, knowing she only had seconds left. The shower turned off. Jessica's heart stopped. She quickly deleted the emails from his sent folder, closed the message app, and set the phone back exactly where she'd found it. She was halfway down the hall when David opened the bathroom door, wrapped in a towel, steam billowing out behind him. "Hey," he said, surprised. "I thought you were downstairs." "Just checking on the kids," Jessica lied smoothly, amazed at how calm her voice sounded when inside she was screaming. "They're both asleep." "Good." David smiled at her, and Jessica wondered how she'd ever found that smile charming. Now all she could see was the face of a liar. "I'll be down in a minute." Jessica nodded and continued down the stairs on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. She made it to the kitchen before the shaking started. She gripped the edge of the counter, breathing through her mouth because breathing through her nose made her smell the dinner she'd cooked, made this nightmare feel too domestic, too normal. 8 months. He'd been cheating on her for 8 months, telling another woman he loved her, planning a future with her, spending money Jessica had helped earn on romantic getaways with someone else, looking Jessica in the face every single day and lying, sleeping next to her, sitting across from her at breakfast, helping their children with homework while texting his mistress. How was that possible? How could someone do that? How could the man she'd trusted with everything, the man she'd built her entire adult life around, be so fundamentally different from who she thought he was? Jessica heard David coming down the stairs. She grabbed a glass and filled it with water she didn't want, just to have something to do with her hands. "You okay?" David asked, opening the refrigerator. "You seem tense." The audacity of the question nearly made her laugh. She was tense because she'd just discovered her husband's 8-month affair and was currently holding back from screaming the truth in his face. "Just tired," Jessica said. "Work has been stressful." "Right, the software thing." David grabbed a beer, like he deserved to relax after his long day of betrayal. "That's almost done, right?" "Almost." Jessica set her water glass down carefully, afraid if she held it any longer she might throw it. "I'm going to bed. I'll be up in a bit. There's a game on I want to catch the end of." Of course there was. Or maybe there wasn't. Maybe he was going to sit down here and text Vanessa, make plans for tomorrow, tell her he loved her while his wife slept upstairs, exhausted from maintaining a life he was actively destroying. Jessica climbed the stairs, each step feeling like she was walking through concrete. In their bedroom, she closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what she'd discovered. Her marriage was over. That much was clear. But ending it would mean telling the kids, would mean dismantling the life they'd built, would mean admitting to everyone, to herself, that she'd been so completely fooled. And David had tonight. He'd told Vanessa they had time tonight, which meant he was probably planning to leave soon, to sneak back to that apartment while Jessica was asleep. An idea crystallized in Jessica's mind. Dangerous, but necessary. She wasn't going to sleep tonight. She was going to watch. She was going to follow him if he left. And she was going to document everything, because when this came crashing down, when she finally confronted David with the truth, she wanted to have so much evidence that he couldn't lie his way out of it, couldn't minimize it, couldn't make her doubt what she knew. Jessica changed into dark, comfortable clothes. She set her phone to silent and placed it in her pocket. Then she lay down on top of the covers, facing the door, eyes open in the darkness, and waited. Downstairs, she heard the television. A basketball game, like David had said. But Jessica wasn't listening to the game. She was listening for the sound of the TV turning off, for footsteps, for the front door opening, for her husband to make the choice that would end their marriage forever. And she didn't have to wait long. At 11:37, Jessica heard the television click off downstairs. She'd been lying in the dark for over an hour, her body rigid with tension, listening to every sound in the house, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking. She heard David's footsteps on the stairs, deliberately quiet. He was trying not to wake her. The bedroom door opened slowly, and Jessica kept her breathing even and deep, eyes closed to slits so she could see through her lashes without appearing awake. David moved around the room like a ghost, gathering clothes from the dresser. Jeans, a shirt. He disappeared into the bathroom, and she heard the sink running briefly. When he emerged, he was dressed, his hair combed, getting ready to see Vanessa like he was going on a date. He stood over the bed for a long moment, looking down at Jessica. She kept her breathing steady, her body still, even though every instinct screamed at her to open her eyes and demand to know where he was going. But she needed to see this through, needed the full picture of his betrayal. David leaned down and kissed her forehead, so gently, so tenderly, that Jessica wanted to scream. The same gesture he'd given Vanessa in that parking lot. The same gesture he was now giving his wife before leaving to be with his mistress. Like he could balance both lives, like he could love two women at once, or like he was saying goodbye to one life while embracing another. Then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Jessica waited until she heard the front door open and close, until she heard his truck start in the driveway. Only then did she move, rolling out of bed and rushing to the window. She watched David's taillights disappear down their street. She grabbed her phone, car keys, and purse, checking quickly on Noah and Sophie. Both were deeply asleep, tangled in their blankets. Jessica hesitated for only a moment. She couldn't leave them alone in the house. Not at night. Not even for this. She pulled out her phone and called the one person she knew would come without questions. "Rachel," Jessica whispered when her friend answered on the second ring. "I need you. Can you come to my house right now? It's an emergency. Are you okay? Are the kids okay?" Rachel's voice was instantly alert. "The kids are fine, but I need you to stay with them. David just left, and I need to follow him. Please, Rachel. I can't explain everything right now, but I need you. I'm already getting dressed. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't do anything stupid until I get there." Jessica paced by the front window, watching for Rachel's car, her whole body vibrating with adrenaline. The tracking app showed David heading toward Westlake Hills, toward Meridian Heights, toward Vanessa. Rachel pulled up in 12 minutes, not 15. She was in sweatpants and a t-shirt, her black hair pulled back in a messy bun, but her eyes were sharp and focused. Jessica met her at the door. "He's cheating on me," Jessica said without preamble. "I have proof. Photos, messages, everything. He just left to go to her apartment, and I need to document it. I need to see it with my own eyes, so he can't tell me I'm imagining things." Rachel grabbed Jessica's shoulders. "Are you sure you want to do this? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I already saw them kiss this afternoon. I already read their messages. I need to know the full extent of it. I need to be able to look him in the face when I confront him and know exactly what he's been doing." Rachel studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, go. I'll stay with Noah and Sophie. But Jessica, be careful, and call me if you need anything." Jessica hugged her friend quickly, gratefully, then ran to her car. The tracking app showed David had stopped. He was at Meridian Heights. She pulled out of her driveway and drove through the empty Austin streets, her hands gripping the wheel so tightly they ached. It was a 22-minute drive at this time of night, with no traffic. Every minute felt like an hour. Jessica's mind raced through everything she'd read in those messages. 8 months of lies. 8 months of David building a relationship with Vanessa, while pretending everything was normal at home. Had he ever felt guilty? Had he ever hesitated before texting Vanessa that he loved her? Or had it been easy for him to split himself in two, to be a husband and father by day, and someone else's lover by night? She pulled into the same spot across from Meridian Heights, where she'd parked that afternoon. David's truck was in the parking lot, third row, next to the black Tesla she now recognized as Vanessa's. The apartment complex was quiet, most windows dark except for a few scattered lights. Jessica checked the tracking app again. David's location was precise enough to show he was inside the building. She zoomed in on the complex's layout online. 4 floors, luxury apartments ranging from 1 to 3 bedrooms. Which one was Vanessa's? She waited, watching, documenting the time. 11:59 at night on Friday, April 12th. Her husband's truck parked outside his mistress's apartment building. An hour passed. Then 2. Jessica's eyes burned from staring at the building, looking for any sign of movement. At 2:13 in the morning, a light came on in a third-floor apartment, corner unit facing the parking lot. Jessica grabbed her phone and zoomed in with the camera. Through the window, backlit by the interior light, she could see 2 figures, close together, embracing. She took photos, even though they were grainy and distant. Evidence, proof, reality. The light went off again minutes later. Jessica sat in her car, in the darkness, and let herself cry for the first time since seeing that kiss this afternoon. Quiet tears that rolled down her face and dripped onto her lap. She cried for the marriage she thought she had, for the man she thought she'd married, for the innocence of her children, who were about to have their world shattered, for 15 years of shared history that was now tainted by betrayal. But even as she cried, part of her mind was working, planning, calculating what came next. She needed a lawyer, a good one. Monday morning, she'd call that firm she'd researched. She needed to protect herself financially. Joint bank accounts, credit cards, everything needed to be secured. She needed to prepare the kids as much as possible, though how did you prepare a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old for their father's betrayal? And she needed one more piece of evidence, the most damning piece. Because David coming to this apartment building could theoretically be explained away. Maybe Vanessa was a client. Maybe this was professional. Maybe. David was good at creating plausible deniability. But if he brought Vanessa to their house, to the home where his children slept, there would be no explanation that could cover that. No excuse that could minimize it. Jessica pulled out her phone and ordered a small security camera from an online retailer with same-day delivery, a discreet one that could be hidden near the front entrance. She'd install it tomorrow while David was at work, and then she'd create an opportunity for him to bring Vanessa to their house. The idea made her nauseous, the thought of that woman in her home, in her space. But Jessica needed irrefutable proof, needed something so concrete that when she went to court for custody, for the house, for everything she deserved after 15 years of partnership, David couldn't paint her as the paranoid wife who destroyed a perfectly good marriage. At 3:47 in the morning, David's truck started. Jessica slid down in her seat, watching through the steering wheel as he backed out of his parking spot. He didn't look around, didn't seem worried about being caught. Why would he? Jessica was home asleep, trusting him, believing his lies. She waited until his truck turned onto the main road before starting her car. She didn't follow him this time. She knew where he was going. Home. Back to their bed. Back to his role as faithful husband. Jessica drove home slowly, exhaustion settling into her bones. When she pulled into the driveway at 4:20, Rachel's car was still there. She found her friend sitting on the couch in the living room, reading a book on her phone. "You're back," Rachel said, studying Jessica's face. "Did you find what you were looking for?" He was there, at her apartment, for almost 4 hours. Jessica's voice was flat, empty. "I watched the lights in her apartment go on and off. I know exactly what they were doing." Rachel stood and pulled Jessica into a hug. Jessica stood stiffly at first, then collapsed into her friend's arms, her body shaking with silent sobs. Rachel held her and said nothing, which was exactly what Jessica needed. No platitudes about how everything would be okay. No false reassurances. Just presence. After a few minutes, Jessica pulled away and wiped her eyes. "Thank you for coming, for staying with the kids. I couldn't have done this without you." What are you going to do now? I'm going to end this, but strategically. I need more evidence. I need to protect the kids and our assets. And then I'm going to make sure David faces every consequence of what he's done. Rachel nodded slowly. You know I'm here for whatever you need, day or night. You call and I come. That's how this works. After Rachel left, Jessica checked on Noah and Sophie one more time. They were still sleeping peacefully, unaware that their mother had spent the night gathering evidence of their father's betrayal. She stood in each of their doorways for a long moment, memorizing their peaceful faces, knowing that soon their lives would change forever. David's truck pulled into the driveway at 4:48. Jessica heard him enter quietly, heard him climb the stairs. She was back in bed, eyes closed, breathing deep and even. He slipped under the covers next to her, smelling of unfamiliar perfume and sex. Jessica lay there, inches from her husband, and felt nothing. No anger in that moment, no sadness. Just cold, clear determination. Saturday morning arrived too soon. Jessica had maybe gotten an hour of actual sleep, her mind too active, too full of plans and contingencies. She woke to find David already up, making breakfast in the kitchen like this was any normal Saturday. Like he hadn't spent half the night in another woman's bed. "Morning," he said cheerfully when Jessica appeared. "I made pancakes, your favorite." Noah and Sophie were already at the table, syrup-covered and happy. Jessica pasted on a smile and poured herself coffee, her movements automatic. "You got in late last night," she said casually, watching David's reaction. He didn't even flinch. "Yeah, sorry about that. Client ran long, then I grabbed drinks with Mike after. I tried to be quiet when I came in." Lie. Built on top of lie. Mike was David's business partner at the gym. Jessica made a mental note to check if Mike would actually cover for David, or if he didn't even know he was being used as an alibi. "It's fine," Jessica said. "I was dead asleep." The morning proceeded normally. Horrifyingly normally. They ate breakfast as a family. David helped Sophie practice her soccer skills in the backyard, while Jessica and Noah played a board game. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect family. Happy, intact, exactly what they'd always appeared to be. At noon, the doorbell rang. Jessica's security camera had arrived. She signed for the package while David was still outside with Sophie. "What's that?" David asked when he came back inside. "A smart doorbell camera," Jessica lied smoothly. She'd become a liar too now, she realized. Betrayal was contagious. After that package theft problem in the neighborhood last month, I thought it would be good to have. "Smart thinking," David said. And the irony wasn't lost on Jessica. She spent the afternoon installing the camera, positioning it to capture the front entrance clearly. David offered to help, but she insisted she could manage. She tested it multiple times, making sure the footage uploaded to her phone clearly. Perfect. That evening, after the kids were in bed, David said he needed to run to the gym to check on some equipment. He'd be back in an hour, he said. Jessica watched him leave through her new camera, then checked the tracking app. He was heading toward Westlake Hills, toward Vanessa. Again. She pulled out her laptop and began researching Texas divorce law. Adultery could affect property division and custody arrangements. Texas was a community property state, meaning everything acquired during the marriage was split 50-50 by default. But fault could change that, especially if Jessica could prove David had spent marital funds on his affair. She thought about that weekend resort in the hill country. The messages had shown they'd gone there in March. Jessica pulled up their credit card statements and found it. A charge for $875 at a luxury resort spa. She'd asked David about it at the time. He'd said it was a business expense, a training conference. Another lie. Jessica went through months of statements, highlighting every charge that seemed suspicious. Expensive dinners at restaurants, jewelry purchases from stores she'd never shopped at, flowers from a florist she'd never used. By the time David's truck pulled back into the driveway at 10:30, Jessica had compiled a list totaling over $12,000 spent on his affair. $12,000 of their money. Money she'd earned through long hours at her demanding job. Money that should have gone to their children's college funds or family vacations. Instead, David had spent it wooing his mistress. Sunday morning, Jessica told David she needed to take a work trip next week. Thursday and Friday, she said. An emergency meeting with a client in Dallas. She watched his face light up with barely concealed excitement. "That's short notice," he said, trying to sound sympathetic rather than thrilled. "Will you be okay?" "I'll make it work. Can you handle things here with the kids?" "Of course. We'll be fine." Jessica nodded, her heart pounding. Because she wasn't going to Dallas. She was going to a hotel 15 minutes away. And she was going to use that security camera to watch David bring Vanessa into their home. Into the house where their children lived. And that would be the final piece of evidence she needed. Monday morning arrived, and Jessica called Martin Hayes, the divorce attorney, from her office at 9 o'clock sharp. His receptionist put her through immediately. "Mrs. Harper," Martin Hayes said. His voice was calm, professional. "Your inquiry mentioned suspected infidelity. Tell me about your situation." Jessica told him everything. The distance, the lies, the tracking app, the photos of the kiss, the messages she'd found, the night David spent at Vanessa's apartment. Martin listened without interrupting, and Jessica could hear him taking notes. "You've done well documenting everything," he said when she finished. "That will be crucial. In Texas, we can file for fault divorce based on adultery, which can affect both property division and custody arrangements. The fact that he's spending marital funds on his affair strengthens your case. How much total have you documented?" "Over $12,000 so far. I'm still going through statements." "Good. Keep documenting. Now, you mentioned you're planning to create a situation where he brings this woman to your marital home while you're supposedly out of town. I understand the reasoning, but I need to advise you to be careful. Don't do anything that could be construed as entrapment or could backfire legally. I'm just going to tell him I'm traveling for work. What he chooses to do with that information is his decision. Fair enough. When you're ready to file, I'll need all your documentation. Photos, messages, financial records, everything. We'll build a case that protects your interests and prioritizes your children's well-being. Do you have any joint accounts or assets I should know about?" Jessica listed everything. The house, purchased 6 years ago, was in both their names. Joint checking and savings accounts, retirement funds, 2 cars, 1 in each name. David's business, which he co-owned with his partner Mike. "We'll need to do a full financial disclosure," Martin said. "Make sure he hasn't been hiding assets or opening accounts you don't know about. I'll send you a client agreement and a checklist of documents I'll need. In the meantime, I'd recommend you open a separate bank account in only your name, not to hide money, but to protect yourself. If he empties your joint accounts during the divorce process, you'll need funds available." The conversation lasted 45 minutes. By the end, Jessica had a plan, a timeline, a strategy for protecting herself and her children. It felt surreal, talking about ending her marriage in such clinical terms. Property division, custody schedules, financial disclosures. But there was also relief in having a professional guide her through this nightmare. On Monday afternoon, Jessica opened a new checking account at a different bank, transferring $5,000 from their joint savings, enough to cover immediate expenses and attorney fees, but not enough to be seen as hiding marital assets. Tuesday, she met with a forensic accountant Martin had recommended, a sharp woman in her mid-50s named Patricia Chen, who specialized in uncovering hidden assets in divorce cases. "Your husband owns a business," Patricia said, reviewing the information Jessica had provided. "That complicates things. We need to determine the true value of his stake in that gym, and whether he's been siphoning money out of it. Sometimes cheating spouses will hide funds in business accounts, claiming expenses that don't exist, preparing for the divorce they know is coming." "I don't think David's planning for divorce," Jessica said. I think he's trying to have both lives at once. Patricia nodded. That's actually worse for him and better for you. He won't have prepared. His financial picture will be clearer. I'll need access to business records, tax returns, bank statements. Can you get those? David keeps everything on his laptop. I know his password. Get me copies of everything you can. The more documentation we have, the better position you'll be in. That night, while David was in the shower, Jessica accessed his laptop. She copied years of business records, tax returns, partnership agreements with Mike, everything Patricia had requested. She uploaded it all to a secure cloud drive that David didn't have access to. He found something else, too. An email from Vanessa, sent 3 days ago with the subject line, Our Future. Jessica's hand hovered over the mouse. Did she want to read this? Did she need to know what they were planning? She clicked. The email was long, detailed, and devastating. Vanessa had written about her vision for their life together. She wanted David to leave Jessica. Soon. Before summer, she'd written, so they could take a trip to Europe together. She knew it would be hard on his kids, but children were resilient. They'd adjust. And in time, Vanessa could be a good stepmother to Noah and Sophie. They could blend their families. Except Vanessa didn't have children. She was talking about inserting herself into the role of mother to Jessica's kids. To Sophie, who still crawled into Jessica's lap for cuddles. To Noah, who came to Jessica with his problems and his triumphs. David's response, sent the same day, was cautious, but not dismissive. He agreed they needed to figure out their future. He loved Vanessa. He wanted to be with her. But the timing was complicated. He needed to make sure his business was protected. Needed to think about custody arrangements. He didn't want to lose his kids. I'm working on it, David had written. I promise. By the end of summer, we'll have a plan. I just need a little more time. Jessica sat back from the laptop, her whole body trembling. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't an affair that would burn out on its own. David was planning to leave. He was strategizing how to dismantle their family with minimal impact to himself. Not to the kids, not to Jessica, to himself. She forwarded the email chain to herself and deleted the evidence from his sent folder, added it to her growing file of documentation. Wednesday evening, Jessica packed an overnight bag. She made a show of it, bringing the bag downstairs, letting David see her preparing for the supposed work trip to Dallas. When do you leave Thursday? David asked, watching her. Early. 6 in the morning. I should be back Friday evening, probably around 7. We'll miss you, David said, and Jessica wondered how he could say that with a straight face when she knew he was probably already texting Vanessa, already planning to bring her to their house the moment Jessica's car pulled out of the driveway. That night, Jessica barely slept. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, she would see the full extent of David's betrayal documented in high definition on her security camera. And then she would have everything she needed to end this marriage and make sure David faced every single consequence of his choices. Thursday morning, April 18th, Jessica kissed Noah and Sophie goodbye. David walked her to her car, playing the role of supportive husband. Drive safe, he said. Text me when you get there. I will. Jessica pulled out of the driveway and drove to the airport in case David was tracking her location. She parked in long-term parking, then called an Uber to take her to a hotel on the other side of Austin. She checked in under her maiden name, locked the door, and opened the security camera app on her phone. The view showed her front door, empty driveway, quiet morning. Jessica ordered room service she couldn't eat and settled in to watch her marriage end in real time. For the first few hours, nothing happened. Jessica watched her phone screen obsessively, the camera feed showing her empty driveway, her front door, the quiet suburban street where she'd thought she was building a life. At 8:45, David's truck pulled out, taking the kids to school, just like he did every morning when Jessica had early meetings. He returned at 9:23, alone. The house sat quiet for hours. Jessica tried to work from the hotel room, connecting to her company's VPN and pulling up the reports she actually did need to review. But her eyes kept drifting to the camera feed, waiting, watching. Part of her hoped David wouldn't do it, that maybe she'd misjudged him, that maybe he still had some boundary he wouldn't cross. At 1:47 in the afternoon, a black Tesla pulled into her driveway. Jessica's heart stopped. She watched Vanessa get out of the car. The woman was even more beautiful in daylight, caught in high definition by the security camera. Tall, blonde, wearing designer jeans and a fitted blazer. She looked nervous, glancing around the neighborhood before approaching the front door. The door opened before Vanessa could knock. David stood there, smiling, relaxed. He pulled her inside quickly, but not before the camera caught him kissing her on the threshold, his hand on her lower back, possessive. The same way he used to touch Jessica when they were young and in love, and the world was full of possibility. The door closed. They were inside. Inside the home Jessica had decorated, where her children slept every night, where she'd cooked thousands of meals and celebrated birthdays and Christmases and all the markers of a life lived together. Jessica sat frozen on the hotel bed, staring at the closed door on her screen. Her hands shook as she took screenshots, documenting the time. 1:49 p.m. on Thursday, April 18th, 2024. The moment her husband brought his mistress into their family home while their children were at school. She wanted to drive there, wanted to walk in and catch them together, but that would ruin everything. The camera was documenting it all. She needed to let this play out, needed irrefutable evidence that she could present to Martin Hayes, and, eventually, to a judge. At 2:53, over an hour later, the front door opened again. Vanessa emerged first, her hair slightly messy, her blazer gone. She was wearing one of David's hoodies. Jessica recognized it immediately. The navy blue one she'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. The one she sometimes wore herself on lazy Sunday mornings. Vanessa was wearing her hoodie. David followed, also disheveled. He wrapped his arms around Vanessa from behind, nuzzling her neck. They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other on Jessica's front porch, in broad daylight, where any neighbor could see, where her children's friends' parents could drive by and witness their father's affair. Finally, they separated. David walked Vanessa to her car, kissed her one more time through the driver's side window. Vanessa pulled away, and David stood watching her go with that same soft expression Jessica had seen in the apartment complex parking lot. Love, or whatever David thought love was. Jessica took screenshots of everything. The kiss on the threshold, the timestamp showing how long Vanessa had been inside, the hoodie, the embrace on the front porch, David watching her drive away, evidence, documentation, proof so overwhelming that David couldn't possibly deny what he'd done. He went back inside at 3:08. The camera showed him locking the door, disappearing into the house. Jessica pulled up the tracking app. David's location showed he was home. He'd stay there until it was time to pick up the kids from school at 3:30. Then he'd play the role of dedicated father, make them snacks, help with homework, act like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just defiled his marriage in the very house where his children lived. Jessica lay back on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling. Her chest felt hollow, like something essential had been scooped out. She'd known this was coming, had planned for it. But seeing it unfold, watching David bring that woman into their home, into their bed, it was worse than she'd imagined. She thought about Sophie, who would come home in a few hours and probably sit at the kitchen table eating the snack David made her, completely unaware that her father had spent the afternoon betraying her mother in the room upstairs. She thought about Noah, old enough to understand when she eventually told him why their family was breaking apart, who would have to reconcile the father he loved with the father who'd done this. Jessica's phone buzzed. A text from David. Hope your meetings are going well. Miss you. The casualness of it. The ease with which he lied. Jessica stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, Meetings are fine. Be home tomorrow evening like I said. David responded immediately with a heart emoji. The same emoji he'd probably sent to Vanessa 1,000 times. Jessica forwarded all the security camera footage to her email, to her cloud drive, to Martin Hayes. She wanted copies everywhere, redundant backups of the evidence that would end her marriage. Her phone rang. Martin Hayes. "I received your files," he said without preamble. "This is exactly what we needed. With this footage, combined with the financial records you've already provided, we have an extremely strong case. When do you want to move forward?" "Soon," Jessica said. "I need a few days to prepare, to talk to the kids' school, to my employer, to make sure everything's in order. But soon." "Understood. I'll have divorce papers drawn up. We'll file for fault divorce based on adultery. Given that he brought his paramour into the marital home, I'm confident we can secure primary custody for you. He'll get visitation, of course, but the children will live with you. The house will likely go to you as well, as it's in the children's best interest to remain in their home. Asset division will be more favorable to you than standard 50-50. We're looking at potentially 60-40 or even better, given his use of marital funds for the affair." Jessica listened to Martin lay out her future in legal terms. Custody schedules, asset division. The dismantling of 15 years of marriage translated into court documents and financial settlements. "There's one more thing," Martin said. "I recommend you not confront him until we've secured copies of all financial documents and you've moved important personal items to a safe location. Men can react unpredictably when caught, and I want you and your children protected. I have copies of everything. I've been documenting for days." "Good. Then I suggest you wait until early next week. File on Monday. Have him served with papers. It's cleaner than a confrontation, more controlled. You maintain the power position." But Jessica shook her head, even though Martin couldn't see her. "No, I need to confront him. I need to look him in the face and tell him I know everything. I need him to understand that I'm not the naive wife he thought he could fool forever." Martin was quiet for a moment. "I understand. But if you do confront him, do it strategically. Have the kids somewhere safe. Document the conversation if possible. Don't let emotion override your legal position." They talked through logistics for another 20 minutes. Jessica would confront David on Saturday. She'd have her parents take Noah and Sophie for the day, tell them it was just so she and David could have a much-needed conversation about their marriage. After the confrontation, David would leave the house. Jessica would change the locks. On Monday, Martin would file the divorce papers. After hanging up with Martin, Jessica called Rachel. "How are you holding up?" Rachel asked immediately. He brought her to the house. While the kids were at school, he brought her into our home and... Jessica's voice broke. "She was wearing my hoodie, Rachel. The one I bought him." "That son of a bitch," Rachel said quietly. "What do you need from me? Can you be there on Saturday? When I confront him? I don't want to do this alone." "Of course. What time?" "Morning. I'm having my parents take the kids around 9. David should be home by then. I'll be there at 9:15. And Jessica, you're doing the right thing. You know that, right? He made these choices, not you." Jessica nodded, even though Rachel couldn't see her. "I know. It just doesn't feel like winning." "It's not about winning. It's about protecting yourself and your kids. That's what you're doing." After they hung up, Jessica lay in the hotel room as afternoon faded to evening. She checked the security camera periodically. David picking up the kids from school. All three of them entering the house together. Lights coming on in windows. The normal rhythms of family life continuing, while everything underneath was poison. At 6:30, David texted, "Kids want to order pizza. That okay?" Jessica, "Sure. Whatever they want." David, "They miss you. We all do. Lies. All lies." But Jessica played along. "Miss you too. See you tomorrow evening." She ordered room service again and couldn't eat it. Took a shower that felt like it lasted hours. Lay awake in the hotel bed, staring at the dark ceiling, thinking about everything that would happen in the next few days. Friday morning arrived gray and overcast, threatening rain. Jessica checked out of the hotel at 9 and drove to a coffee shop, killing time until it was reasonable to return from Dallas. She sat by the window with a latte she didn't drink, watching Austin wake up around her. People heading to work, living their normal lives. She wondered how many of them had secrets like David's. How many seemingly normal marriages were rotting from the inside. At 3 in the afternoon, Jessica texted David, "Meeting wrapped early. On my way home. Should be there by 7. David, "Great. I'll have dinner ready. Kids will be excited." Jessica drove slowly back to her house, taking the long route, buying time. She stopped at a parking lot and just sat for a while, hands on the steering wheel, preparing herself to walk back into that house and pretend everything was normal for one more day. When she finally pulled into her driveway at 7:05, Noah and Sophie burst out the front door, running to hug her. Jessica held them tight, breathing in the kids' smell of shampoo and grass stains and innocence. "We missed you, Mom," Sophie said, wrapping her small arms around Jessica's waist. "I missed you too, baby. So much." David stood in the doorway, smiling. "Welcome home." Jessica met his eyes and forced herself to smile back. "It's good to be home." Inside, the house smelled like garlic and tomatoes. David had made pasta, her favorite. The table was set. It looked like a scene from a happy family dinner. But Jessica noticed things now that she wouldn't have seen before. The couch cushions arranged differently than she'd left them. A wine glass in the sink that she didn't recognize. Small disturbances in her space from Vanessa's presence. Dinner was torture. Jessica pushed food around her plate while David talked about his week. How busy the gym had been, how Noah had aced his math test, how Sophie had scored 3 goals at practice. Normal conversation that felt surreal, given what Jessica knew. After dinner, after baths and bedtime stories and tucking in the kids, Jessica found David in the living room watching television. "I'm exhausted," she said. "I'm going to bed early." "Want company?" David asked with a suggestive smile. The suggestion made Jessica's stomach turn. He'd been with Vanessa yesterday, in their bed, and now he wanted to sleep with Jessica too? Like he could have both women whenever he wanted? "I'm really tired," Jessica said. "Maybe this weekend." There wouldn't be a this weekend. Not the way David was imagining. But he didn't need to know that yet. Saturday morning, April 20th, Jessica woke early. She'd barely slept, running through what she would say to David. How she would say it. Rachel was coming at 9:15. Her parents were picking up Noah and Sophie at 9. That gave her 15 minutes with David alone before Rachel arrived as backup. At 8:30, Jessica started making breakfast. Pancakes and bacon, filling the house with normal weekend morning smells. David came downstairs in his pajama pants and t-shirt, hair messy from sleep. "Smells amazing," he said, kissing the top of her head. Jessica forced herself not to flinch away. Noah and Sophie appeared shortly after, drawn by the smell of bacon. They ate together at the kitchen table, and Jessica memorized this moment. The last breakfast they'd have as an intact family, even if that intactness was an illusion. At 8:55, Jessica's parents arrived. Her father, Tom, was 68, with silver hair and kind eyes. Her mother, Susan, was 66, and had never met a problem she couldn't solve with a casserole and fierce loyalty. "Grandpa! Grandma!" Sophie shrieked, running to hug them. "We're going to the Science Museum today," Tom announced, "and maybe ice cream after if you're good." Noah, trying to act too old to be excited but failing, grinned. "Cool!" Jessica hugged both her parents at the door. Her mother gave her a long look, reading something in Jessica's face. "Everything okay, honey?" Susan asked quietly. "It will be," Jessica said. "I promise." After they left with the kids, the house felt unnaturally quiet. David was in the living room scrolling through his phone, probably texting Vanessa, making plans for later, now that Jessica was back from her trip. Jessica poured herself a cup of coffee she didn't want and sat down at the kitchen table. Her phone showed 9:07. Rachel would be here in 8 minutes. Jessica needed to start this before Rachel arrived, needed David to think they were alone. "David," she called. "Can you come here for a minute?" He appeared in the kitchen doorway, still relaxed, still unsuspecting. "What's up?" Jessica gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down. We need to talk." Something in her tone made him hesitate. "Is everything okay?" "Sit down." David sat, his expression shifting from confused to wary. "Jess, you're kind of freaking me out. What's going on?" Jessica pulled out her phone and opened the folder where she'd saved all her evidence. Photos, screenshots, security camera footage, months of documentation. She set the phone on the table between them and slid it toward David. "This is going on," she said quietly. David picked up the phone, and Jessica watched his face as he scrolled through the images. She saw the exact moment he understood what he was looking at. The color drained from his face. His hands started to shake. The first photo was him and Vanessa kissing in the Meridian Heights parking lot. The second was screenshots of their text messages, declarations of love, plans for their future. The third was the security camera footage from Thursday, time-stamped, showing Vanessa entering their house, wearing Jessica's hoodie when she left. "Where did you—" David's voice came out strangled. "How did you—" "8 months," Jessica said, her voice remarkably steady. "You've been cheating on me for 8 months. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't figure it out?" David set the phone down like it was burning him. "Jessica, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you met Vanessa at your gym and started sleeping with her? How you've been lying to me every single day since January? How you spent over $12,000 of our money taking her to nice dinners and buying her jewelry while I was home taking care of your children?" Jessica's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. "Or maybe you want to explain how you brought her into our house on Thursday, into our bed, while our kids were at school." "You were in Dallas," David said stupidly. "I was at a hotel 15 minutes away, watching you on the security camera I installed last weekend. I saw everything, David. I have photo evidence of everything." David's face cycled through emotions: shock, fear, and then, incredibly, anger. "You were spying on me? You tracked me?" Jessica laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "That's what you're focused on? I discovered you're having an affair, and your concern is that I violated your privacy. You had no right. I had every right." Jessica slammed her hand on the table. "You're my husband, or you were supposed to be. You made vows to me. 15 years ago, you promised to forsake all others. You promised to love me, to be faithful to me, and you broke every single one of those promises." The doorbell rang. Rachel. Right on time. "Who's that?" David asked, panic in his voice now. "My friend. Witness. Support system. Pick whichever word you like." Jessica stood and walked to the front door, letting Rachel in. Rachel gave her a quick hug before following her back to the kitchen. David stared at Rachel, then back at Jessica. "You planned this whole conversation. You planned it." "Yes, I did, because I needed to be prepared. I needed documentation, and legal advice, and a support system. Because, unlike you, David, I don't make life-altering decisions on impulse, or because they feel good in the moment." Rachel sat down next to Jessica, silent but present, a united front. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Jessica had seen 1,000 times when he was stressed. Okay, yes, I've been seeing Vanessa, but it's not what you think. It's not what I think. I have text messages where you tell her you love her, where you plan a future with her, where you tell her you're going to leave me. What part am I misunderstanding, David? I got confused, David said desperately. Work was stressful, and you were always busy with your job, and I felt like we were drifting apart. Vanessa paid attention to me. She made me feel important. So this is my fault? Jessica's voice was dangerously quiet. Because I was busy with the job that pays half our bills? Because I was managing our household and raising our children while you were apparently feeling neglected? No, that's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Because it sounds like you're making excuses. It sounds like you're trying to justify betraying your wife of 15 years because someone younger and prettier made you feel special. David opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I love you, Jess. I love our family. This thing with Vanessa, it just got out of hand. But it doesn't mean I don't love you. You don't love me, Jessica said flatly. You love the life I provide, the clean house and the meals I cook and the children I raise. You love having someone to come home to who keeps your life running smoothly. But you don't love me, because love doesn't betray. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't spend 8 months building a relationship with someone else while pretending everything's fine. What do you want me to say? David's voice broke. I made a mistake. A huge, terrible mistake. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll end it with Vanessa completely. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Jessica shook her head slowly. It's too late for that. Do you understand? You didn't make one mistake. You made thousands of mistakes. Every text message, every lie, every time you kissed her and then came home and kissed me, every time you told our children you loved them while planning to leave us. Those weren't mistakes, David. Those were choices. Deliberate, calculated choices. So what? That's it? You're just giving up on 15 years of marriage? I'm not giving up. You gave up months ago. You gave up every time you chose Vanessa over our family. David stood abruptly. I don't know what you want from me. I apologized. I said I made a mistake. What more can I do? Jessica pulled an envelope from the folder she'd prepared and slid it across the table. Here's what you can do. You can take that envelope. Inside is a printed summary of everything I know. Every lie, every expense, every moment you spent with Vanessa. You're going to take your phone, and you're going to call Vanessa right now, in front of me, and you're going to end it. Why? If we're getting divorced anyway, why does it matter? Because I want her to know. I want her to understand that her relationship with you was built on lies, that you lied to her about being separated, that you're being caught and exposed, and because I want the satisfaction of hearing you tell her it's over. David's jaw clenched. And if I refuse? Rachel spoke for the first time. Then Jessica's lawyer will make sure every single detail of your affair becomes part of the public divorce record. Every text message, every photo, every cent you spent. Your business partners will find out. Your clients will find out. Noah and Sophie will find out every ugly detail when they're old enough to read court documents. David stared at Rachel, then back at Jessica. He saw his trap, saw that this wasn't a negotiation. This was the consequence of his choices, packaged and delivered with cold precision. With shaking hands, he picked up his phone and dialed, put it on speaker. Vanessa answered on the second ring. Hey, baby. I didn't expect to hear from you this morning. Is everything okay? Jessica watched David's face as he tried to find the words, saw him open his mouth, close it, struggle. David? Vanessa's voice was concerned now. What's wrong? I can't do this anymore, David finally said. My wife knows. She knows everything. About us, about Thursday. She has evidence, photos, everything. It's over, Vanessa. We can't see each other anymore. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, what are you saying? You told me you were separated. You said you and Jessica barely spoke anymore. I lied, David said miserably. You lied. Vanessa's voice went from concerned to cold in seconds. About being separated? About your marriage being over? I'm sorry. You're sorry? I've been dating you for 8 months. I met your friends. I was planning a future with you, and you're telling me now that you lied about being separated? It's complicated. No, David, it's not complicated. You're a liar. You lied to your wife, and you lied to me. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Vanessa, please. Don't. Don't call me again. Don't text me. Don't come to the gym. We're done. And for the record, I hope your wife takes you for everything you have. You deserve it. Vanessa hung up. David set his phone down slowly, staring at it like it was something alien. There, I ended it. Are you happy? Happy? Jessica stood up. My marriage is destroyed. My children are about to have their world shattered. And you think I'm happy? I'm not happy, David. I'm devastated. But I'm also done. You need to pack a bag and leave. Today. Now. Whew. This is my house, too. Actually, according to my lawyer, given that you committed adultery and brought your paramour into our marital home, there's a strong case for me to have full possession of this house. So you're going to leave voluntarily today, or I'm going to call the police and show them the evidence of your affair and explain that I don't feel safe with you here. Your choice. David looked between Jessica and Rachel, seeing no sympathy in either face, seeing that this was real, that his life as he knew it was ending right here, right now, in their kitchen on a Saturday morning. Where am I supposed to go? I truly don't care. Hotel? Friend's place? Your business partner's couch? That's not my problem anymore. What about Noah and Sophie? What about them? Jessica's voice cracked for the first time. You should have thought about them before you brought your girlfriend into their house. You should have thought about them every single time you lied to me. But since you didn't, I'll be the one to protect them now. You can see them on a schedule once our lawyers work out custody arrangements. You're keeping my kids from me? I'm protecting them from having to watch their father pack his bags the same day they find out he's been having an affair. They'll stay with my parents tonight. Tomorrow, we'll sit down together and tell them age-appropriate truths about why you're moving out. And then, we'll figure out a custody schedule that prioritizes their well-being, not your convenience. David stood there for a long moment, and Jessica saw realization finally hitting him. This wasn't fixable. This wasn't something he could smooth over with apologies and promises. He'd destroyed his marriage, and now he had to live with the consequences. I need time to pack, he said quietly. You have 1 hour. Take clothes for a week, your toiletries, whatever you need immediately. We can arrange a time next week for you to get more of your things with a police escort if necessary. A police escort? Jesus, Jess, I'm not dangerous. You brought your mistress into my home. You exposed our children to your affair. I don't know what you're capable of anymore. David turned and walked up the stairs without another word. Jessica listened to his footsteps overhead, heard drawers opening and closing in their bedroom. She sat back down at the kitchen table, her entire body shaking now that the confrontation was over. Rachel squeezed her hand. You did it. You were amazing. I feel like I'm going to throw up. That's normal. You just blew up your life. But you did it on your terms, with your eyes open. That takes courage. They sat in silence, listening to David move around upstairs. 45 minutes later, he came down with 2 large duffel bags. He paused in the kitchen doorway. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I really am sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Jessica looked at him, this man she'd loved for over half her adult life, and felt nothing but exhaustion. Intentions don't matter when the impact is destruction. You need to leave now. David nodded and walked to the front door. He paused there, hand on the doorknob, like he was waiting for Jessica to stop him, to change her mind, to give him one more chance. She didn't. The door closed behind him, and through the window, Jessica watched him load his bags into his truck, watched him sit in the driver's seat for a long moment before starting the engine, watched him drive away from the house they'd bought together, from the life they'd built together, from the family he'd destroyed with his selfishness. When his truck disappeared around the corner, Jessica finally let herself collapse. Rachel held her while she sobbed, not saying anything, just being present, being solid, when Jessica felt like she was falling apart. It's done, Jessica finally said, her voice muffled against Rachel's shoulder. It's really done. First part's done, Rachel corrected gently. Now comes the hard part, telling the kids, the legal process, rebuilding. But you're not doing it alone. I'm here. Your parents are here. You have people who love you. Jessica nodded, pulling herself together. I need to call my parents. Warn them that David and I will need to talk to the kids tomorrow. They'll want to know what's happening. Want me to stay while you make the call? Please. Jessica called her mother and explained everything. The affair, the confrontation, the fact that David had left. Susan listened without interrupting, and when Jessica finished, all her mother said was, "We'll keep the kids tonight. You get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll all figure this out together." After Jessica hung up, Rachel said, "You should eat something. When's the last time you had a real meal? I can't even remember. Then we're ordering food, and we're going to sit on your couch and watch something mindless on TV, and you're going to take the first steps toward your new life." They ordered Chinese food and found a comedy special on Netflix. Jessica couldn't focus on it, kept looking around her house, seeing everything differently now. This was her space now, hers and the kids. David had forfeited his claim when he'd chosen Vanessa, when he'd brought her here, when he'd broken every promise he'd ever made. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Jessica opened it cautiously. "This is Vanessa. I don't know if you'll believe me, but I had no idea David was still married. He told me you were separated, that the divorce was already in progress. I'm so sorry for the pain I've caused you. For what it's worth, I ended things with him completely. I hope you and your children will be okay." Jessica stared at the message for a long time before showing it to Rachel. "Do you believe her?" Rachel asked. "Does it matter? She still slept with my husband. Whether she knew the full truth or not, she made choices too." Jessica deleted the message without responding. Vanessa's guilt wasn't her problem to manage. That night, after Rachel finally left, Jessica walked through her house room by room. Noah's room with his baseball posters and scattered clothes. Sophie's room with her beloved stuffed animals lined up on her bed. The guest room that would become David's room for now, when the kids visited him. Once they worked out custody, she ended in her own bedroom, their bedroom, where David had been with Vanessa 2 days ago. Jessica stripped the bed completely, stuffing the sheets and comforter into garbage bags. She would buy new ones, everything new, a fresh start in every way possible. She showered for a long time, trying to wash away the weight of the day. Then she climbed into bed with just a blanket and stared at the ceiling in the dark, alone in her house for the first time in years. It should have felt lonely, frightening, but instead, what Jessica felt was something unexpected. Relief. She'd been living in a marriage that was already dead. She just hadn't known it. Now the truth was out, painful and devastating and real, and she could finally start dealing with reality instead of the illusion David had created. Tomorrow would be hard, telling Noah and Sophie, seeing their faces when they learned their father had moved out, but Jessica would be there for them, would help them navigate this new reality with honesty and love. And after that, slowly, she would rebuild. Not the life she'd thought she had, but something better, something real, something built on truth instead of lies. Jessica closed her eyes and, for the first time in months, fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Sunday morning, April 21st, arrived with brilliant sunshine that felt almost mocking. Jessica woke alone in her bed, momentarily disoriented before the weight of yesterday settled over her like a heavy blanket. David was gone. She'd ended her marriage. Today she had to tell her children why their father wasn't home. She showered and dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made her feel strong. A navy blue blouse, dark jeans, her favorite earrings. Armor for the hardest conversation she'd ever have to have. Her parents brought Noah and Sophie home at 10 in the morning. The kids burst through the door, full of stories about the science museum and the ice cream they'd had after. Jessica hugged them both, holding on a little longer than usual. "Where's Dad?" Noah asked, looking around. "His truck's not here." Jessica exchanged a glance with her parents. Her father nodded encouragingly, while her mother squeezed her shoulder. "Let's sit down," Jessica said gently. "We need to talk about something important." They gathered in the living room. Sophie climbed into Jessica's lap automatically, while Noah sat next to her on the couch, suddenly wary. He was 12, old enough to know that "we need to talk" meant something bad was coming. Is someone dead? Noah asked quietly. No, sweetheart. No one's dead. But Dad and I have made a decision. We're going to be living separately for a while. You're getting divorced? Noah's voice was flat, and Jessica's heart broke at how quickly he'd gone there. Like he'd been expecting this, waiting for it. We're working through some things. Dad made some choices that hurt our marriage very badly, and we need time apart to figure out what comes next. What choices? Noah demanded. What did he do? Jessica had rehearsed this moment with her parents and Rachel, had consulted child psychologists online about how to tell children about infidelity. The advice was consistent. Be honest, but age-appropriate. Don't give more details than necessary. Don't speak badly about the other parent, but don't lie to protect them either. Dad started a relationship with someone else while he was still married to me. That's called being unfaithful, and it's a very serious thing in a marriage. It broke the trust between us, and trust is really important for a marriage to work. Sophie looked up at her with wide, confused eyes. Dad has another girlfriend, like in the movies. Yes, baby, something like that. But he's married to you, Sophie said, her voice small. You can't have a girlfriend if you're married. That's the rule. You're right. That is the rule. And Dad broke that rule, which is why we can't live together right now. Noah stood up abruptly, his face flushed. I don't believe you. Dad wouldn't do that. You're making it up because you're mad at him about something else. Jessica had prepared for this too. For anger, for denial, for the children taking sides. She pulled out her phone and opened a carefully curated photo. Not the intimate ones, but the one of David and Vanessa kissing in the parking lot. She showed it to Noah. I'm not making it up, honey. I know this is really hard to understand, and even harder to accept, but it's the truth. Noah stared at the photo, his face cycling through emotions too complex for a 12-year-old to process. Shock, betrayal, confusion, anger. When did this happen? It's been going on for several months. And you just found out? I found out last week. I needed time to make sure I understood the situation fully before I talked to Dad about it. Is that why he left? Because you found out? Yes. I asked him to leave yesterday so we could have space to figure things out. Sophie started crying, not fully understanding but sensing the magnitude of what was happening. Is Daddy coming back? I want Daddy to come back. Jessica held her daughter close, stroking her hair. Daddy will still be in your life. He loves you both very much. This isn't about you kids at all. You didn't do anything wrong. This is between Dad and me. But things are going to be different now. Dad will have his own place to live, and you'll spend time with him there, and time here with me. I don't want two houses, Sophie sobbed. I want our family to be together. I know, baby. I know. And I'm so sorry that this is happening. Noah sat back down heavily, still staring at the photo on Jessica's phone. Does the woman, the girlfriend, does she know about us? About me and Sophie? She knows Dad has children, but no, she's not going to be part of your lives. Dad and I both agree on that. Good, Noah said viciously, because I don't ever want to meet her. I hate her. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to have big feelings about this. But Noah, I need you to understand something. The woman Dad was seeing, she made bad choices too. But the person responsible for this is Dad. He's the one who was married. He's the one who made promises to me and to this family. She didn't break those promises. He did. Tom, Jessica's father, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Noah, Sophie, your mom is being incredibly brave right now, and she's going to need your help in the coming weeks. This family is going through a really hard time, but you're still a family. That doesn't change. They talked for another hour. Noah asked hard questions that Jessica answered as honestly as she could. Where would Dad live? When could they see him? Would they have to change schools? Would they have to sell the house? Sophie mostly cried, processing in the way 8-year-olds do, unable to fully grasp the permanence of what was happening. By noon, Noah had retreated to his room, needing space to process. Sophie refused to leave Jessica's side, clinging to her like she was afraid Jessica would disappear too. Susan made lunch that no one ate, and Tom called David to arrange a time for him to see the kids. David arrived at 3 in the afternoon. Jessica watched from the window as he parked in the driveway of what used to be his home. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing rumpled clothes, like he'd slept in his truck. Noah and Sophie ran to him when he came inside, and Jessica watched David hold his children while they cried. Whatever anger she felt toward him, she couldn't deny that he loved Noah and Sophie. That made it worse somehow, that he could love them and still do what he'd done. "Can we talk?" David asked Jessica quietly, while the kids were getting their shoes to go with him to the park. "If it's about the divorce, talk to my lawyer. If it's about the kids, we can communicate through text or email." "Jessica, please, I just want 5 minutes." Against her better judgment, Jessica nodded. They stepped into the kitchen while Tom and Susan stayed with the kids. "I moved in with Mike temporarily," David said, "just so you know where the kids will be when they're with me." "Okay. And I wanted to say again how sorry I am. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I never meant for any of this to happen." Jessica looked at him, this man she'd spent 15 years of her life with, and felt like she was looking at a stranger. "Do you want to know what the worst part is, David? It's not even the affair. It's that you're still lying. I'm not. You are. You're saying you never meant for this to happen like it was some accident. Like you tripped and fell into an 8-month relationship with another woman. You meant for it to happen every single time you texted her. Every time you lied to me about where you were. Every time you made a choice to continue that relationship. So stop saying you didn't mean it. Own what you did." David's jaw clenched. "Fine. You want me to own it? I was unhappy. I felt invisible in this marriage. You were always working or busy with the kids, and I felt like I didn't matter anymore. Vanessa made me feel important. So you're blaming me now? I'm not blaming anyone. I'm trying to explain. No. You don't get to explain away 15 years of marriage because you felt neglected. Everyone in a long-term relationship feels neglected sometimes. That's called life. That's called having jobs and kids and responsibilities. You talk to your spouse about it. You go to counseling. You don't start sleeping with someone else. I know that now. The kids are waiting," Jessica interrupted. "You should take them to the park or wherever you're planning to go. Have them back by 6 for dinner." David opened his mouth like he wanted to say more, then closed it. He nodded and left to collect Noah and Sophie. After they were gone, the house felt cavernously empty. Jessica sat at the kitchen table with her parents, and Susan made tea that Jessica actually drank this time. "You're handling this with remarkable strength," her father said. "I'm proud of you. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "That's what strength looks like sometimes," Susan said gently. "Barely holding together, but doing it anyway." The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers and logistics and trying to maintain normalcy for the kids. Martin Hayes filed the divorce papers on Monday, April 22nd. David was served at the gym on Tuesday morning. According to Mike, who called Jessica out of courtesy, David had locked himself in the office for an hour after the process server left. Patricia Chen, the forensic accountant, completed her review of David's finances. The news wasn't good for him. Beyond the $12,000 Jessica had already documented, Patricia found another $6,000 in cash withdrawals from their joint savings that David had no receipts for, probably spent on Vanessa. There were also suspicious business expenses that didn't match up with actual gym operations. David had been siphoning money from his business, possibly preparing for a divorce he saw coming, or possibly just funding his double life. The financial discovery strengthened Jessica's case significantly. Combined with the evidence of adultery and David bringing Vanessa into the marital home, Martin was confident they could secure primary custody and favorable asset division. David hired his own lawyer, a sharp woman named Caroline Reeves, who tried immediately to paint Jessica as vindictive and controlling. She argued that Jessica had violated David's privacy by accessing his phone and tracking his location. Martin shut that down quickly, pointing out that the tracking app was mutually agreed upon and that Jessica had legitimate concerns about marital infidelity. The custody evaluation was hardest. A court-appointed psychologist interviewed both Jessica and David separately, then spent time with Noah and Sophie. Noah, when asked, said he wanted to live primarily with his mom. Sophie, younger and more confused, said she wanted everyone to live together again. But if that wasn't possible, she wanted to be with her mom because her mom made her feel safe. The psychologist's report noted that while David was clearly a loving father, he had demonstrated poor judgment and impulse control in conducting an affair and bringing his paramour into the family home. The report recommended primary custody to Jessica, with David receiving alternating weekends and one evening per week. In early June, 2 months after Jessica had confronted David, they reached a preliminary custody agreement. Noah and Sophie would live primarily with Jessica. David would have them every other weekend from Friday evening to Sunday evening, plus Wednesday evenings for dinner and homework help. Holidays would be split. Both parents would have equal say in major decisions about education and health care. The financial settlement took longer to negotiate. David's lawyer fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. By August, they'd agreed to terms. Jessica would keep the house, buying out David's share at a favorable valuation. Asset division would be 65% to Jessica, 35% to David, reflecting both his adultery and his misuse of marital funds. David's share of the gym would remain his, but he'd have to pay Jessica a portion of its appreciated value acquired during the marriage. David would pay child support of $2,300 per month. It wasn't about the money for Jessica. It was about David taking financial responsibility for the children he'd put second to his affair. Through all of this, Jessica worked. She threw herself into her job at Apex Solutions, finding solace in problems she could actually solve. The software implementation that had been such a nightmare finally went live in May. It was a massive success, streamlining operations exactly as promised. In June, Jessica's boss called her into his office. "The board was impressed with how you handled the implementation," he said, "especially given what you've been dealing with personally. That kind of focus and professionalism under pressure is rare." Jessica hadn't told anyone at work about the divorce, but apparently word had spread anyway. Small company. People talked. "We're creating a new position. Vice President of Operations. Significant raise, stock options, corner office if that matters to you, and we'd like you to take it." Jessica sat back in her chair, stunned. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. You've earned this, multiple times over." The promotion came with a $40,000 raise and put Jessica's salary at $175,000 a year, more than enough to support herself and the kids comfortably. More than enough to prove she didn't need David's income to maintain their lifestyle. She accepted. Noah and Sophie adjusted to the new custody schedule slowly. Noah remained angry at David for months, refusing to talk to him beyond monosyllables during their Wednesday dinners. By summer, the anger had softened into disappointment, which was somehow worse. He looked at his father with different eyes now. Less admiration, more wariness. Sophie struggled with the transitions between houses. She'd cry on Friday evenings when David picked her up, not wanting to leave Jessica. She'd cry Sunday evenings when he brought her back, not wanting to leave him. Jessica bought child psychology books and learned about developmental stages and divorce trauma. She and David, despite everything, managed to co-parent with reasonable civility. Not friends, not even friendly, but functional. Jessica started therapy in May with Dr. Emily Carter, a kind woman in her 50s who specialized in divorce recovery. The first few sessions, Jessica cried through most of the hour. Slowly, with Emily's help, she began to untangle her identity from the marriage that had defined her adult life. "You've been Jessica the wife for 15 years, Emily said during one session. "Now you get to discover who Jessica the individual is. What do you want? What makes you happy? What would you do if you weren't considering anyone else's needs? Jessica didn't have immediate answers. She'd spent so long being wife, mother, employee, that she'd forgotten how to be just herself. So she started exploring. She joined a painting class on Tuesday evenings when David had the kids. She discovered she was terrible at painting, but loved the meditative quality of it. She started running again, something she'd given up after Sophie was born. She read books David would have found boring. She decorated the house in colors and styles she'd always wanted, but had compromised on. Slowly, incrementally, she rebuilt herself. Rachel was there through all of it. On the hard nights when Jessica questioned every decision she'd made. On the okay nights when Jessica felt almost normal. On the surprisingly good nights when Jessica realized she was genuinely happy for the first time in years. "You're different now," Rachel said one evening in September as they sat on Jessica's back porch with wine. The kids were with David. The house was quiet. Lighter somehow, like you've been carrying something heavy for so long that you forgot it was weighing you down. Jessica thought about that. "I think I've spent 15 years trying to be enough for David, trying to be the perfect wife so he'd be happy. And it was never enough because the problem wasn't me. The problem was him, his choices, his inability to be satisfied with what he had. I can't control that. I can only control how I respond to it." "And how are you responding?" Jessica smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "By building a life I don't need to escape from." In late September, Jessica attended a medical technology conference for work. Her company was exploring new software integrations with healthcare systems, and, as the newly promoted VP of Operations, Jessica was leading the initiative. The conference was in Houston, 2 days of presentations and networking. On the second day, during an afternoon coffee break, a man approached her as she reviewed notes in the hotel lobby. "Jessica Harper?" he asked. "I heard your presentation this morning on operational efficiency. It was brilliant." Jessica looked up to find a man in his early 40s, with kind brown eyes and an easy smile. He wore a suit well, carried himself with quiet confidence. "Thank you," she said. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" "James Mitchell. I'm an orthopedic surgeon at Houston Methodist. We're looking at upgrading our entire operational system, and your presentation addressed exactly the challenges we're facing." They talked for 20 minutes about software systems and operational workflows. Professional conversation that somehow felt effortless. James was intelligent, asked good questions, actually listened to her answers. When the conference resumed, he asked for her business card. "If you don't mind, I'd like to connect you with our operations team. Get your input on our system upgrade." "Of course," Jessica said, handing him her card. She didn't think much of it. Professional networking? Part of her job. 3 days later, James emailed. Not about operational systems. About a restaurant he'd noticed near the conference hotel that he'd wanted to try but hadn't had time. Would she be interested in dinner next time she was in Houston? Jessica stared at the email for a long time. It was clearly a date request. Friendly? Low pressure? But definitely personal rather than professional. Her first instinct was to decline. She wasn't ready. The divorce wasn't even final yet. Wouldn't be until December. She had 2 kids and a complicated life and emotional baggage that could fill a warehouse. But then she thought about Emily's question. "What do you want?" Jessica wanted to have dinner with an interesting man who thought she was brilliant, who didn't know her as David's wife or Noah and Sophie's mom, but as herself, as Jessica, accomplished professional who gave good presentations. She replied, "I'd like that. I'll be back in Houston next month for follow-up meetings." They had dinner in late October at a quiet Italian restaurant. Jessica had told Noah and Sophie she had a work dinner, which was true enough. Rachel knew the full truth and had given her blessing with an enthusiastic, "It's about damn time." James was even better company one-on-one than at the conference. Divorced 3 years himself, no children, he understood the complexity of starting over. They talked about work, about Houston versus Austin, about books and travel, and the small things that revealed personality. "I should be honest," Jessica said over dessert. "My divorce isn't final yet. Won't be until December. I have 2 kids, 12 and 8. My life is complicated right now." James nodded thoughtfully. "Mine was complicated 3 years ago when I was where you are now. I'm not looking for complicated, but I'm not opposed to it either. We could start simple. Dinner when you're in Houston, coffee when I'm in Austin for continuing education seminars. See where it goes without pressure." "That sounds good," Jessica said, and meant it. They saw each other once or twice a month through the fall, always in public, always ending with a respectful goodnight. No pressure for more. James never pushed, never made Jessica feel like she owed him anything. He was steady, patient, present in a way David had never been even before the affair. In November, Jessica told Noah and Sophie she'd been having dinner with a friend. Not a boyfriend, just someone she'd met through work who she enjoyed talking to. Noah was suspicious, but didn't push. Sophie wanted to know if Jessica was going to get married again. "No, baby, I'm not getting married again. I'm just having dinner with a friend sometimes." "But what if you fall in love with him?" Jessica pulled Sophie into her lap. "Right now, I'm focused on being your mom, and being good at my job, and being happy with who I am. If someday I fall in love with someone, that would be nice. But it's not something I'm looking for. It's not something I need." And that was true. Jessica had discovered something crucial in the months since David left. She didn't need a partner to feel complete. She was complete on her own. If James or someone else eventually became part of her life, wonderful. But her happiness didn't depend on it. The divorce was finalized on December 15th, 2024. 8 months after Jessica had seen David kiss Vanessa in that parking lot. 8 months of lawyers and negotiations and rebuilding. Jessica sat in the courtroom with Martin Hayes while the judge reviewed the settlement agreement and granted the divorce. "The marriage of Jessica Ann Harper and David Charles Harper is hereby dissolved," the judge intoned. Just like that. 15 years of marriage ended with a gavel strike and legal paperwork. Jessica felt lighter walking out of that courtroom than she had in years. David was waiting in the hallway. They'd arrived at different times, sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, like adversaries rather than people who'd once loved each other. He approached her carefully. "Jessica, can we talk for a minute?" She glanced at Martin, who nodded and stepped away to give them privacy. "What is it, David?" He looked older than he had 8 months ago. Tired. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I just wanted to say, I hope we can eventually be friends. For the kids, they need us to get along. We get along fine. We co-parent civilly. But David, we're not going to be friends. We're never going to be friends. What you did broke something that can't be repaired. I know. I want you to know that ending things with you is the biggest regret of my life." Jessica looked at him, searching for the right words. "You didn't end things with me, David. You destroyed them. There's a difference. And for what it's worth, I don't believe it's your biggest regret. I think your biggest regret is getting caught. If I hadn't found out, you'd still be living your double life, thinking you could have everything." David flinched. "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is what you did to our family. But I'm done being angry about it. I'm done letting what you did define my life. So I hope you figure out whatever it is you were looking for with Vanessa. I hope you learn to be honest with whoever you're with next. And I hope you're a better father to Noah and Sophie going forward than you were a husband to me." She turned and walked away before he could respond. Martin fell into step beside her. "That was well handled," he said. "It needed to be said. Now it's done." Christmas that year was different, but not bad. Noah and Sophie spent Christmas Eve with Jessica and Christmas morning with David. Jessica had worried it would feel empty, wrong, but instead it felt peaceful. She made hot chocolate and watched Christmas movies with the kids. They opened presents together. It was smaller, quieter than previous years, but it was real. honest. No one was pretending to be happy while planning to leave. In January of 2025, almost exactly a year after David had started his affair, Jessica went on her first official date with James. He drove to Austin for the weekend, and they had dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. Afterward, they walked along the river trail, talking easily. "My kids might be ready to meet you soon," Jessica said. No pressure, just mentioning it as a possibility. James smiled. "I'd like that, whenever you and they are ready." They met in February. Jessica arranged it carefully, casually. A Saturday afternoon at the park where Sophie had a soccer game. James came to watch, sitting with Jessica in the stands. He was introduced as Jessica's friend from Houston. He cheered when Sophie scored a goal, asked Noah about his baseball team, made no attempt to be their new dad or replace David, just showed up, was himself, and let the kids get comfortable. "He's nice," Noah said later that evening. "Is he your boyfriend now?" "We're dating," Jessica said carefully, "which means we're spending time together and seeing if we want to keep spending time together. Nothing's decided yet. Do you like him?" "I do. He's kind. He listens. He makes me laugh. Those are good things in a person." Noah nodded slowly. "He's not like Dad." "No, he's not. I think that's good. I think you need someone who's not like Dad." Jessica hugged her son, this almost teenager who'd been forced to grow up too fast because of his father's choices. "I love you, Noah. You know that, right? You and Sophie are the most important people in my world." "I know, Mom. I love you too." Spring came, and with it, Sophie's 9th birthday. She had a party at the house with school friends and relatives. David came, keeping his distance from Jessica but present for his daughter. James didn't attend. Jessica had asked him not to, wanting to keep Sophie's birthday focused on her, not on adult relationship dynamics. Later, after the party wound down and Sophie was in bed exhausted but happy, Jessica sat on her back porch and thought about how far she'd come. A year ago, she'd been trapped in a dying marriage, not knowing her husband was betraying her. She'd been anxious and uncertain, and slowly losing herself, trying to be enough for someone who was never going to be satisfied. Now, she was divorced. She had primary custody of her children. She'd been promoted at work to a position she'd earned through excellence and hard work. She had a man in her life who respected her, who didn't play games, who showed up when he said he would. She had friends who'd proven their loyalty. She had a life that was messy and complicated, but undeniably hers. Rachel came over later that evening after Sophie's birthday party, bringing wine and the easy companionship of a decade of friendship. "You look happy," Rachel said, studying Jessica's face in the porch light. "I am happy. Not in spite of everything that happened. Maybe because of it. The divorce forced me to figure out who I am without David, forced me to build a life on my own terms. Do you ever miss him? The good parts of your marriage, before everything went wrong?" Jessica considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the idea of what I thought we had, the security of a long marriage, the shared history. But I don't miss the reality of it. The man I thought I married never actually existed. David was always capable of what he did. I just didn't see it. And now I see clearly, and I'm building something better. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real. That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking wine, watching the Austin sky fade from orange to purple to black. In June, a year and 2 months after Jessica had discovered David's affair, she got a call from Mike, David's business partner. He was apologetic and clearly uncomfortable. "I thought you should know," Mike said. "David's seeing someone. It's been a few months. I think it's getting serious." Jessica felt a small pang, not of jealousy, but of concern. "Is it Vanessa?" "No, different woman. Met her at the gym. Her name's Crystal. Does she know about me? About the divorce?" "I think so. He seems to have learned something from the whole Vanessa situation. Thank you for telling me." After hanging up, Jessica realized she truly didn't care who David was dating. It didn't affect her life anymore. He was allowed to move on. So was she. The difference was that she'd done the work to understand what went wrong. She'd gone to therapy. She'd confronted her own role in the marriage's breakdown, not the affair itself, but the ways she'd ignored warning signs, the ways she'd let herself become so absorbed in work and kids that she'd stopped tending to her partnership. David, as far as she knew, had done none of that work, which meant he'd probably repeat the same patterns with Crystal. But that wasn't Jessica's problem anymore. In July, Sophie started asking questions about James. Could he come to her soccer games more often? Could they have dinner at the house instead of always going out? Could he meet her friends? Jessica talked to David about it first, out of courtesy. They met for coffee to discuss the kids, something they did monthly now, maintaining civil communication. Sophie's getting attached to James, Jessica said. I want to make sure you're okay with him being more present in her life. David was quiet for a long moment. Is it serious? You and him? It's becoming serious. We've been dating for almost a year. He's kind to the kids. He respects boundaries. He's not trying to replace you. I know I don't have a right to an opinion about who you date. You don't, Jessica confirmed. But as the kid's father, I care about who's around them. Have you, I don't know, done a background check or anything? Jessica almost laughed. David, he's an orthopedic surgeon at a major hospital. He's been vetted more thoroughly than either of us. But yes, I've done my due diligence. He's exactly who he says he is. David nodded, staring into his coffee. Okay, then I'm okay with it, as long as the kids are happy and safe. They are, I promise. As summer faded into fall, Jessica's life settled into a new rhythm. Work was demanding, but rewarding. She'd been with Apex Solutions for 9 years now, and was being considered for an executive position. Noah was starting 8th grade, suddenly interested in girls and video games and everything except what his mother thought. Sophie was thriving in 4th grade, still her sunny self, despite the upheaval of the divorce. James had become a steady presence. He stayed over sometimes on weekends when the kids were with David. They talked about the future cautiously, not rushing, but acknowledging that this was becoming something significant. James had no interest in being a father figure to Noah and Sophie. He was clear about that, and Jessica appreciated his honesty. But he cared about them because they mattered to Jessica, and that was enough. On a Saturday in October, almost exactly 18 months after Jessica had seen David and Vanessa kissing in that parking lot, Sophie had a championship soccer game. The stands were packed with parents and siblings and friends. Jessica sat with Noah on one side and James on the other. Rachel had come too, because she never missed Sophie's big games. Across the field, Jessica could see David standing alone near the opposite bleachers. He'd come to every game, to his credit. Whatever else he'd failed at, he was trying to show up for his kids now. The game was intense. Sophie's team was down by 1 goal with 5 minutes left. Sophie, playing midfielder, got the ball and drove toward the goal. Jessica found herself on her feet, screaming encouragement. Sophie dodged a defender, lined up her shot, and kicked hard. The ball sailed into the upper corner of the net. Goal. Tie game. Sophie's face lit up with pure joy. She turned toward the stands, searching for Jessica, and when their eyes met, she pointed at her mom and grinned. Jessica blew her a kiss, her heart full. 2 minutes later, Sophie's team scored again. They won the championship. The kids on the field erupted in celebration, jumping and hugging and being gloriously, messily happy in the way only children can be. After the trophy ceremony, Sophie ran to Jessica, still in her muddy uniform, and launched herself into her mother's arms. "Did you see my goal, Mom? Did you see it?" "I saw it, baby. You were amazing." Sophie hugged Noah, who ruffled her hair in the way that annoyed her, but also made her feel loved. She high-fived Rachel, and then she turned to James, suddenly shy. "Thanks for coming," Sophie said. "Wouldn't have missed it," James replied. "That goal was incredible." David approached then, and the air got complicated. He hugged Sophie, congratulated her, made eye contact with Jessica over their daughter's head. In that look was everything they'd been, and everything they weren't anymore. Shared history, shared children, separate lives. "Great game, Sophie girl," David said. "I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Daddy." He didn't acknowledge James, and James didn't push for acknowledgement. They existed in parallel, both caring about Sophie, not needing to interact beyond that. Later that evening, after pizza and showers and Sophie's trophy finding its place on her shelf next to other treasures, Jessica tucked her daughter into bed. "Mom?" Sophie asked sleepily. "Are you happy now?" Jessica smoothed hair back from Sophie's forehead. "Yes, baby. I'm happy." "Good. You smile more now than you used to." Before the divorce, I mean. Jessica felt her chest tighten. She'd thought she'd hidden her unhappiness so well, but children saw everything. "I do smile more now, because I'm living a life that feels true. Does that make sense?" Sophie nodded, eyes already drooping closed. "I'm glad. You deserve to be happy, Mom. You're the best mom in the whole world." Jessica kissed her daughter's forehead and quietly left the room, closing the door almost all the way, leaving it cracked the way Sophie liked. In the hallway, she stood for a moment, letting Sophie's words wash over her. "You deserve to be happy." It had taken a long time for Jessica to believe that, to believe she deserved happiness, not because of what she did for others, but simply because she existed, because she was a person of value, independent of her roles as wife or mother or employee. She found James in the living room, reading a book he'd brought. Noah was in his room, likely gaming with friends online despite it being past the agreed-upon time. But Jessica was choosing her battles tonight. "Everything okay?" James asked, looking up. Jessica sat down next to him, curling into his side when he put his arm around her. "Everything's good. Really good, actually. Sophie was incredible today." "She was. Both my kids are pretty amazing. They get that from their mom." Jessica smiled, settling deeper into the comfortable silence. Through the window, she could see the Austin night sky, stars visible despite the city lights. Somewhere across town, David was probably at his apartment, watching television or texting his new girlfriend. Maybe thinking about the family he'd lost. Maybe not. Jessica didn't spend time wondering anymore. David had made his choices, and he was living with the consequences. Natural consequences. Not punishment Jessica had engineered. He had a smaller apartment instead of the family home. He saw his children every other weekend instead of every day. His relationship with Noah was strained, requiring active effort to maintain. He'd lost the respect of mutual friends, the support of his own mother who'd been devastated by his betrayal, and had made her loyalty to Jessica clear. But Jessica, she'd gained so much. Not because David lost, but because she'd chosen to rebuild rather than collapse. She'd gone to therapy and done the hard work of understanding herself. She'd advanced her career. She'd taught her children about resilience and honesty. She'd opened herself to new love cautiously, but genuinely. She'd learned that she was whole on her own, that partnership was a choice made from strength, not a need fulfilled from weakness. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Rachel, Sophie was a superstar today. Proud of her. Proud of you." Jessica replied, "Thanks for coming. Means everything. Rachel, always. That's what family does." And that was it, wasn't it? Family wasn't just blood or legal ties. Family was the people who showed up, who stayed, who celebrated your victories and held you through your failures. Rachel was family. Her parents were family. Noah and Sophie were family. And maybe, slowly, carefully, James was becoming family too. Jessica thought about that message David had sent a year and a half ago, the one that had started everything. "I'm busy." 2 words that had changed her entire life. At the time, they'd felt like a knife to the heart, evidence of emotional distance, a sign that she'd become invisible to her husband. But looking back now, Jessica realized those 2 words had been a gift, a painful, devastating gift that had forced her to wake up, to investigate, to discover the truth about her marriage before she wasted more years on a man who didn't value what he had. If David had answered her call that day, had talked to her normally, maybe she would have ignored the signs for months longer, maybe years. Maybe she would have spent her 40s trapped in a marriage that was already dead, with a man who was building an exit strategy while she planned their future. Instead, that cold message had been the catalyst for change, for truth, for Jessica reclaiming her life and building something real from the wreckage. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, writing down a thought that had been forming for months. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the thing that saves you. David's betrayal destroyed the life I thought I had, but it forced me to build the life I actually needed. I am stronger now, clearer now, more myself now than I ever was in my marriage. I didn't want this pain, but I'm grateful for what it taught me. I'm grateful for who I've become. Jessica saved the note and put her phone away. She sat with James in the quiet house where her children slept safely, where she'd built a home that was truly hers, where every choice, every piece of furniture, every moment of peace was authentically chosen. She thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago, anxious, uncertain, slowly disappearing into the role of perfect wife for a man who would never be satisfied. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, but also softer. Someone who knew her worth. Someone who wouldn't settle for lies disguised as love. "What are you thinking about?" James asked softly. Jessica smiled. "About how strange life is. How the things we think will destroy us sometimes just transform us instead. I'm not who I was before the divorce. I'm someone better." "You're pretty remarkable, Jessica Harper." "So are you, James Mitchell." They sat there in the peaceful quiet, and Jessica felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, though she was happy. Not relief, though she felt that too. What she felt was possibility. The future stretched out before her, unwritten, open to whatever she chose to make of it. Noah emerged from his room then, shambling into the living room with teenage awkwardness. "Can I talk to you about something?" he asked Jessica. "Of course." Jessica sat up, giving Noah her full attention. James excused himself to give them privacy. Noah settled into the chair across from her, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. "There's a girl at school, Maya. She asked if I wanted to go to the movies with her this weekend." "And do you want to?" "Yeah, but I also feel weird about it because of what happened with Dad. Like, what if I hurt someone the way he hurt you? What if I'm like him?" Jessica's heart broke and swelled simultaneously. She got up and sat next to her son, taking his hand. "Noah, listen to me. You are not your father. You get to make your own choices. The fact that you're even worried about this, that you're thinking about how your actions affect other people, that already makes you different from the choices he made. Your dad's problem wasn't that he fell in love with someone else. People's feelings change. His problem was that he lied. He tried to have everything without being honest about what he was doing. You don't have to be afraid of dating or relationships because of what he did. You just have to be honest. If you like Maya, tell her. If you stop liking her, tell her that too. Don't lie to spare feelings. Don't lie to avoid consequences. Just be honest, even when it's hard. Can you do that?" Noah nodded slowly. "I think so." "Then you're already way ahead of where your dad was at 41 years old." Noah gave her a small smile, then hugged her quickly before retreating back to his room. Jessica sat there, thinking about generational patterns and how they could be broken, how children learned from their parents' mistakes as much as their successes. The clock on the wall showed 10:30. Late, but not too late. Jessica texted Sophie's soccer coach, thanking her for a great season. She texted her boss, confirming Monday's strategy meeting. She texted David because co-parenting meant communication, reminding him about Noah's baseball game Tuesday evening. She was building a life, piece by piece, text by text, choice by choice. Not a perfect life. There would be hard days still. Moments when she questioned her decisions. Times when Noah struggled with David's betrayal. Times when Sophie missed having both parents in one house. Times when Jessica felt lonely even with James beside her. But underneath all of that would be a foundation of truth, of choices made consciously, of a life lived authentically rather than performed for someone else's approval. James returned to the living room. Everything okay with Noah? Better than okay. He's thinking about dating and being scared of turning out like his dad and processing all the complicated feelings that come with being 12 and having your world shifted. He's lucky to have you helping him navigate it. I'm lucky to have him. Both of them. They've made me braver than I knew I could be. James smiled and pulled her close. Want to watch something before bed? Actually, I just want to sit here for a while. Be quiet. Be grateful. I can do that. So they sat, in Jessica's living room, in her house, in her life that she'd fought so hard to reclaim. Outside, Austin hummed with late-night traffic and possibility. Inside, her children slept peacefully. And Jessica, for the first time in longer than she could remember, felt complete. Not because a man was sitting beside her. Not because her divorce was final, or her career was successful, or her children were thriving. Though all those things were true and mattered. She felt complete because she'd survived the worst thing she could imagine and come through it stronger. Because she'd looked at the ruins of her marriage and chosen to build something new rather than stay trapped in the wreckage. Because she'd learned that she could rely on herself, trust herself, be herself, without apology or compromise. That cold message, "I'm busy," had been the beginning of her ending with David. But it had also been the beginning of her beginning with herself. And that beginning, hard-won and authentic, was worth every painful step it had taken to get here. Jessica closed her eyes and breathed deep, feeling the steady presence of James beside her, the sleeping peace of her children upstairs, the solid walls of her home around her. This was her life now. Messy and complicated and uncertain and absolutely perfectly hers, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.